Chris, I got to ask you first, man, before we even start. Why'd you cut your hair, dude? Because I'm not digging the short hair, man.
I appreciate your honesty in this case. And I'll be honest with you, I'm on the fence even now after the fact. I cut my hair because I had a significant birthday back in November, and I spent 26 years with the long flowing locks.
Man, that looks so good.
Oh,
too.
And I
that
still
long hair, man.
You know, but I thought, man, I got it. And here's the other thing too. I got 2 boys, right? And they've never seen Dad with short hair, and I was like, you know what? I can grow it back out. It's fine. I'm gonna cut it this one time. I'm gonna check it out. But here's what I forgot: is the growing back factor. Once you cut it short, you know the deal, right? Like it's going to be another year and a half, 2 years of this like shaggy.
Oh yeah, it gets in this weird phase to where it just looks terrible and you can't do anything with it.
Yeah, it's bad. So you're wearing a hat for a year and a half, you know.
Yeah.
So I just haven't really crossed that next, step to go, okay, I'm going back with it, so just bear with me. But this winter might be the time. I don't know yet. So, but I'm so sorry to let you down.
Well, what was the significant birthday? I mean,
I turned 50 years old.
50 years old.
Yeah.
Okay.
In November, and I had been in Nashville with long hair for 25, 26 years. So it was a big deal. Oh, and by the way, it was my birthday that morning, and my wife said, I got you a birthday present. Now, she did not mean for me to go get all my hair cut off, and it was long. It was like yours at that point. Now,
it looked way better than mine, dude.
Not this.
Your hair looked way better. My hair is so stringy and greasy, man.
Yeah, so she said, I got you an appointment set up, and she was just going to have me go in and get a shave. I'd never had any of that kind of stuff where you lay down and they put all the stuff on, and it feels nice, So we got in there, and I told the lady, I was like, just cut it off. Just go for it.
So this was a last minute.
It kind of was. It's not like I was sitting around thinking about it. Yeah. But, again, man, I go back and forth with it,
Well, it's intriguing to me because I think your hair is it becomes part of your brand, to be honest with you, especially when you're a performer.
Yeah.
Which, by the way, your hat, too. The hat you're wearing is sharp as a tack, man. What kind of hat is that?
Well, this is from Wichita Hat Works. There's actually a sort of fun story to this thing. I was out with Jamie, which I'm sure we'll cover some more of that stuff, but I played, with Jamie Johnson for many years, and we did a show at this place in Wichita, and it's right beside this place that makes these hats. Well, if you sell your show out, the part of the deal is the venue sends you over to Hatman Jack's over at Wichita Hat Works, and they fit you and put you in a hat. They didn't realize that Jamie had like 20 guys in the band, so we just come pouring into this place, and they're like, oh God. So, anyways, but this was a great situation because it wasn't just walk in and pick one out from the wall. This thing was flat when I got it, and then he kind of measures your face, and this dude knows what he's doing. And he looks and says, this is the kind of hat that'll work for you. So that's kind of where it came from. So.
It looks so good on you, man.
Thank you.
And I just ordered a hat, a felt hat from, I think, Filson. You heard of Filson? They make like wool, like it's an American made.
I know the brand.
High dollar clothing. And I just ordered a wool hat from them, a brimmed hat. Mm-hmm. But when you order a nice hat from whoever, Stetson or whoever, I've never found one that like fits my head perfectly.
It's a crapshoot.
It's either a little too loose or a little too tight or. So I can only imagine if you have one like that, custom done, it just fits your head perfectly in your face. And that's a special item right there, man.
You know what's interesting, and I feel like we're probably both kind of equally old souls. So if you go back 100 years, 150 years, I feel like there's a chance that people's stuff was fit better and was made better because you walked into somebody and you had it fitted. And because how many times you go buy a pair of jeans, and I don't know what size you wear, but I could buy 3 pair of 32, 34s, and they all going to fit completely different,
100%.
all 3 of them. Same thing with hats, right?
Yep.
So that's why I feel like it's important to go in and see a dude, not like I would have done it on my own, but I'm glad we got the opportunity to. And he looks at your face and he goes, he knows, right? That's what he does for a living. Here's what'll look good on you, like a short brim, long brim, the whole deal. So anyways, yeah, it's worth checking into.
Well, and I was asking about your hair too, because it does become part of your brand. It becomes part of, like I saw on your website, one of the pictures is it's a real dark, like, profile picture of you. And like your hair and everything just makes it stand out, that profile. And my beard's the same way. It's become like part of my brand and how people, notice me and, the picture that they have of me in their mind. And so I've always asked myself that same question. I mean, will I ever shave my beard? And I've always told people, I'm like, if you ever see me without my beard, something bad has happened. Like, so something big is going to happen in my life for me to shave my beard. So turning 50 is a big thing.
I mean,
it's not a bad thing, but it's a big thing.
Yeah. Well, I guess if you want to get deep, let's go ahead and do it. The hair for me and 50 for me, especially from a artist, singer, songwriter situation, it's a gate, right? It's another plateau. And I think that may have played into it just a little bit. Is I've spent 25 years doing this thing. Is it time for maybe something a little different? And I know it's hair. We're talking about hair, right? So at the end of the day, you're going to be the same dude the next day.
But when you've had it that long, yeah.
So I think there may have been a little bit of part of that, really to get in depth with it, that was kind of like, maybe it's time for another chapter, And I think that may have had something to do with it. And I do think a lot of times we put too much emphasis on numbers, what's another birthday? It is what it is. But, for me, it just seemed like, I guess that, and I thought that much about it, that may have had something to do with it, though.
No, I totally get that, man. It's signifying like a shift in your mission. In what you're really going to pour your heart and your soul into, and I really want to get into that shift here in a minute because, at some point in the conversation, because like you said, you've spent 25 years in the music industry, country music, as a singer, as a songwriter, as a musician. You play all types of instruments. I watched one video of you today playing a daggone harmonica.
Well, there's a long story to that.
I was like, that is so cool, man.
Listen, if you don't care, I'll tell you this. Yeah. So I'm out in if we're on the clock, you better tell me, because
we have no time.
I was out. So I met Jamey Johnson in 2000. And as he'll tell it, I was playing on, and this will get into harmonicas, just bear with me. So I was playing on Broadway, Tootsies and Legends and Roberts and all that stuff a lot. Like, we lived down there. And Jamey just moved to town, and he tells this all the time. But he walked up and he was like, "Oh, you care if I sing a song?" I didn't know who he was. He had a cowboy hat on and no beard, and I'm like, "Sure, come on, man." I never had a problem with that kind of stuff. Actually, we're there for 4 hours, like in those days. And a lot of times you're like, I'm beat, man. We've played the same song 3 times.
I can only imagine.
So that's how I met Jamey, and he got up there and I'm sitting out there going, daggone, this guy's pretty good, So he would come back, not every night, but he would come back every once in a while and, of course, set in. So at that point, were you more established than he was in the industry, or that's tough to say?
Were you guys both kind of starting off and kind of at the same place in your career? Or?
We were running neck and neck, at the front end like that. So gotcha. I think I moved to town a couple of years before he did. There were quite a few people that were like, man, Dierks Bentley and I were we would. God, I'm going backwards.
Yeah, I didn't mean to interrupt your story.
I'll eventually
wondering. Yeah,
I'll eventually get back to that, but I can briefly say, when you first moved to town, at least for me, it was open mics. So I want to be a songwriter, right? So I would go do the open mic night. So basically, you walk into the place, Bluebird, or back then it was the Broken Spoke, or there was a few different places, and you walk in and sign your name, and then they go down the list and they say, "All right, Chris, you're up with Dierks and Joe." So all of a sudden, I'm sitting on a stage in front of 10 or 20 or 100 songwriters out there, just waiting their turn. beside Dirks and whoever the other guy is, you know, and that's how I got to know a lot of those dudes.
Okay.
So there was a lot of us that started at the same time doing the same thing. And so that's kind of when I met Jamie, and we became friends. You know, we would see each other all. There was a big group of us that was all kind of, and actually it's funny, I played just almost every night, and I would see those dudes coming out, hanging out. You know, it was Lee Brice and Jamie and Jared Neiman and there's just Randy Hauser. We're just all over the place, you know. Mm-hmm. So I was writing with Jared Neiman one day, and I was writing with Rob Hatch. He's a buddy of ours, and Jared came over, and he had a #1 song. And he said, "I want y'all to come to my #1 party." And it was Lover Lover was the song.
I remember that song.
So we go to the #1 party. It was at BMI, and Jamie was there, and I hadn't seen him in a while, you know, and he was out hitting it hard. You know, he had already had In Color, and he was doing really well. Mm-hmm. And he said, "You ought to come out and open some shows for me." And I was like, and I'll never forget that. It was so funny, man. You know, he's a man of few words. I said, "I'd love to, just holler at me." He said, "I don't do a lot of hollering anymore." And so Arliss was his tour manager, and I talked to Arliss and Daryl. And so anyways, I'd go out and open some shows for him. And it was just me and a guitar walking out there in front of the Jamie Johnson crowd, right? And so then he'd come out and do his show. Well, we'd get on the bus and go to the next town or whatever. And I kept on being so like amped. I want to get out there and play with them, you know, because I'm out there by myself, and I love bands, you know, I love jamming. Mm-hmm. So I'm like, I kind of know how to play harmonica a little bit, you know. I've got one, which you got to have more than one for every key, you know, each key that you play. And so I had like 3 or 4, you know. So I'd be sitting backstage playing along while they're doing their show, and I'm like, I can do this one. So I'd just walk out there and grab a mic and play this song with the band, and he got a kick out of that, you know. And I'm learning how to play harmonica. So
live on stage.
I mean, pretty much, you know. The reason I even ever bought one in the first place is because I had this old Jeep. It was a 95 Jeep Wrangler, and the radio went out in it. I got wet or something, I don't know. So I bought a harmonica. I was like, well, I'll just play this harmonica while I'm driving around. So anyways, so I'm out there playing, and finally one day he's like, why don't you just join the band? And I was like, all right, sounds good to me. I'm out here doing this stuff anyways. So the first I'm officially in the band gig, I'm playing harmonica, and that's it. I'm not even playing guitar at this point because he had 2 guitar players already out there. And the first gig we did was Farm Aid, and it was in Hershey, Pennsylvania, and it was in a stadium, you know, so it wasn't just some little gig.
Yeah.
So we're walking to the stage, and I got my harmonicas. I hope I've got enough keys to cover all the songs he's going to do, you know. And we're on our way down there. Of course, Willie Nelson's a big part of Farm Aid. It's pretty much, he was one of the founders of it. And as we're walking down to the stage for our set, which I'm already pretty nervous about anyways, there is Mickey Raphael, which is Willie's harmonica player, and he has been for 50 years, you know, like he's the dude. Wow. You know, he's the guy. And he's played on all the stuff that you and I listen to daily. You know, when you hear any of that Willie stuff, that's him, you know. And we're walking with John Selman, who's Willie's tour manager. And John goes, hey, Chris, I know you play harmonica. Mickey's right there. You want to meet him? And we're about to go on stage. And I was like, no, I don't. Not right now. And he's like, Mickey, come up. And he's like, hey, this is Jamie's harmonica player. And I'm like, oh God, no, man. Okay. And of course, you know, at this point, I'm like, I'm in. So, yeah, I play harmonica. He's like, you know, and he didn't ask me what I play. You know, what kind of harmonica do you play? Because I was nervous that I'd say, well, it's the one you get at Walmart, you know, it's the Marine Band. But then I asked him after the show, I said, well, what do you play? And it's the same thing, you know. It was like he had a bag full of them. But anyways, I'm nervous. So then I get up there, and we're doing the show in this huge crowd, you know, and we're doing a song that everybody's passing a solo. So I know I got a solo coming, right? So Jamie looks at me, and I look over across the stage, and Mickey's standing over there watching us, which, you know, as you will. And I'm like, don't look over there. Just play yourself.
Yeah.
And so I look over here, and I look to the other side of the stage thinking, I'll just look over this way, you know. And there was Neil Young who also plays harmonica a little bit, you know. So I was like, well, you're in the middle of it now, so I just ripped it, you know. I just went for it.
Was that video?
There's a chance. I don't know which one that you saw, but there's quite a few of me playing harmonica on some stuff in there, so I don't know which one it was.
It's such a cool instrument, man.
It is.
I mean, you can put it in your pocket, and it makes such a just a sound that hits you, man. Mm-hmm. It hits you deep.
Doesn't it take you to a place? Like a harmonica to me, depending on what it is, takes me to a patch of woods.
I agree.
Yeah, it does.
It's just something special about the sound it makes.
But you're right that it is great. And to any kids that may hear this, go learn how to play harmonica, because you got just one little case to carry everywhere you go, and that's it. You don't have to load drums and guitars and all this stuff. And you can learn it while you're driving, while you just, you know, it's a simple thing to play. So
yeah. So all that. Singer, songwriter, musician.
Yeah.
And now podcast host.
Yeah.
Of the Fully Armed podcast.
Fully Armed.
And I've actually been listening all morning. I subscribed today and really got to dig into your episodes and listen to your mission and what you're really trying to accomplish with the show.
Yeah.
And is that kind of that shift that you were talking about in terms of really getting into almost this ministry aspect of your life? And I know you said on there, hey, I'm not a preacher.
Yeah.
I'm not a teacher, which, by the way, be careful about saying that.
I know.
Because you might not, we don't know what we are, right? Because God might call you tomorrow and say, hey, man, no, you are going to be a teacher from now on. So was that a big shift for you?
It's crazy that you just brought up that, because that was me trying to make a big statement. So basically I was host, you know, had a guest, and I said, listen, I just want to make sure I'm clear. I'm not a preacher and I'm not a teacher. And how quickly and swiftly God works in your life is it's Him, so it shouldn't be surprising. But even today, this morning, I thought about when I said that, and I thought about the fact that I was wrong in saying that, because I limited myself to what it was that He's able to get me to be able to do. So even just 3 months ago when I said that, I was in a different headspace, in a different place. I was not fully committed, even though I had changed my whole life plan by getting this RV and turning it into a studio and stepping out in faith. I was not, even back then, I wasn't stepping out in faith. Even within just the most recent of times, I've realized that I was hindering myself because I was leaning to my own understanding in what it was that I was doing. Yeah. So I don't know how, well, I do know how it's happened. It's by Him, but in the last very recent times, I've realized I was not fully committed. I was not fully armed, because I did have a few of the things that were in the armor, but I did not allow myself to have the faith, which is one of the main things that's in the armor.
Yeah, I heard you say that this morning. You read, I listened to the initial episode, which was a wonderful one to start off with, and you read from Ephesians 6, right?
That's the one, yeah.
Yeah, Ephesians 6, where the Apostle Paul goes through and talks about these different pieces that, whether it's the gospel or it's our faith or our salvation or these different pieces, and how they protect us as warriors walking through this life and as disciples of Christ. And you said that. You said, and faith is one of those things, like one of the most important pieces of armor to you, and I think to all of us, we could all agree to that. And you said, because what do you have without faith? And you know what? That's a good question, man. You know, I travel around and speak quite a bit. And this year I've done a lot of speaking, man. And I start off my speech, and the statement you made on that show, well, what do you have without faith? I mean, it's the question I start my speech off with. I put I put a picture of a human skull on a big screen, and I ask people, I say, what is that? And everybody says, well, that's a skull. And I say, no, that's you. That's your future.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So since we've established that that is your future,
that's where you're headed.
That's my future, that's where we're all headed, what hope do you have? I mean, you have no hope. There is no hope.
Not in the flesh.
No, there is no
There's
hope.
no flesh left in that picture.
Exactly, brother. I mean, without this faith that we have been given to believe upon the gospel of Jesus Christ, to believe the good news and the truth, you're exactly right, man. It's like it's the foundation of life itself, because without that, I mean, when I was young and I didn't have faith, you know, it was easy when you were young to kind of put your hope in other things, even though those were false things. But you were naive, right? You thought, I can put my hope in this career as a SEAL, or in my music, or in money, or things like that. And you think it's going to last. But man, as you get older, you start to realize, there's no hope in any of this. No. And if I didn't have the faith that I've been given, and the gift of salvation, and the faith I've been given to believe upon the gospel of Jesus Christ, I don't know that I would continue to wake up every morning and live. Honestly, I mean, I'm just being honest with you.
I hear you. Listen, so many scriptures run through my head when we're talking about this stuff, but I'm going to go straight to the one that's on there now because of what you just said. I'm reading the other night just through Philippians, and the first chapter of Philippians, and Paul's in jail, and he's just sick and tired of it, right? And he makes this statement that I've heard and I've read for years, but it didn't really hit me until the other night, the living word, right? So a buddy of mine just recently, we hear these things all the time, the living word of God, and I've heard it so much I don't think that much about it. And he goes, no, that's because when you read this one day and you read it the next year, it means something totally different, because this word in this book is alive. It's moving within you. So all of a sudden, this thing I read makes total sense to me, and it was Paul saying very, very simply, to live as Christ, to die as gain.
Yeah.
And he was in a position where he was like, I'd rather die. You just said, wake up. Without faith, I'd rather just wake up and be like, I'm done. But he said, but I'm going to keep trucking, because I know that the finish line is there. The gain that I'm looking for is to be done with this place and to leave that skull sitting there and to move on to heavenly realms. But he needs me, and he's using me right now for this purpose. Yeah. So that's where that faith comes in.
Yeah, man. And how this applies to the people listening to this podcast. First of all, if you don't have faith in Christ, in the gospel, ask for it. Ask for it. And knock, seek.
If you don't mind.
Yes, sir.
I've got to jump in, because he's leading our conversation straight into the scripture that he prepared me for. I'm just going to say it flat out. So I was sort of in a trench this last week or so, which he puts us in, and it's on purpose. So I found my way into James, and man, I'm sitting here talking like I'm some kind of scholar, and I'm not going to say I'm not, but I have not nearly. I've scratched the surface, and I want to get into it deeper. But so in James, I'm so familiar with the first chapter of James, because it says, "Count it pure joy when we go through trials of many kind, because it builds perseverance." Well, I've known that, and I'm like, I like that. I've always kind of leaned on that. But if we go even further into it, it says, if any of you lack in wisdom, ask, and he will give it to you. It doesn't say ask, and if he feels good that day about where you are in life, he'll give it to you. It says ask, and he will give you wisdom. But what I kept not going far enough into was realizing that if you go a little further in that first chapter of James, it says, but if you ask and don't believe, he ain't going to give it to you. Mm-hmm. And you're like the waves just washing back and forth in the ocean. And that goes right back to what you're saying. yes, ask for it and he'll give it to you, but you better believe in what it is you're asking, and you better go ahead and stay out of his way. And that's kind of where I'm at with some of the comments you said earlier about me saying, you know, I'm not a preacher, I'm not a teacher. I'm going to be whatever it is he wants me to be if I stay out of his way and let him do the work. So, yes, faith.
I love that, brother. Yeah. Ask for it, man. And what stops us from asking for it is our own pride. It's our own, you know, sometimes it's our intellect.
It's our understanding.
It stops you from, see, that's the thing that stands between us and, in a lot of cases, that's the thing that stands between us and receiving the gift of salvation and receiving faith. The thing that stands between us and that is ourselves.
Yeah,
our own pride and our own understanding and our own intellect.
Fear.
Yeah,
I mean,
that could be a big one too.
It just depends on your personality.
Yeah, because you say, well, if I do ask for this and the Holy Spirit does come and reveal to me who Christ is and impart this faith to me, well, daggone, I'm going to have to change everything about my life, right?
Yeah.
Well, yeah, you're darn right you're going to have to change everything about your life, but I've got some good news for you. Yeah. When you change all those things about your life is about to get so much better than you could have ever imagined it being. And I don't care if you are a billionaire. I don't care what you have here in this life and on this earth. When you bring yourself, or you are brought into the marvelous light of Jesus Christ, and he gives you this desire to be like him, and he leads you in that, and he chastises you, and but he loves you at the same time.
Yeah.
It's like, dude, now you're about to really start experiencing the abundant life. And I'm not saying abundance in riches, and I'm not saying abundance in things, and I'm just talking about just waking up every morning with an abundance of hope.
Yeah.
You know?
I do.
Come on, man.
Amen.
So, yeah, man, I know so you actually grew up in a small town in Tennessee, Decatur, Tennessee. I've never been there before. Where is that?
So if you just go that way, about an hour and a half, you'll run right into it. So go above Chattanooga, I-75, then go to the river to the west, and so that's where it is. It's a very small town. Meigs County is the county. Of course, you know, all of us Southerners got to talk about our county that we're from. You know? So Meigs County, and it's very small. It's actually one of the only counties in Tennessee that doesn't have train tracks. There's no interstate. It's all river. That's the whole, you know, basis of it. So Decatur's a little town, Watts Bar Lake. That's where I grew up fishing and doing all my.
Well, I want to hear what happened on that dam.
Yeah?
Yeah, I want to hear that.
All right.
At some point.
Okay. Yeah. No, I'll tell you right now, but I'm like, how'd you? Okay, you've done a little homework.
I know you grew up in a Christian home, attending a small congregation, a small church that was pastored by your great-grandfather.
Well, yeah, so in that case, it's funny, my family got a hold of me, and they're like, now, you know, your great-granddad was a preacher. His name was, was Earl. Okay, they're going to hear this and be like, no, you've messed up. I actually knew my great-grandmother very well. She died when I was 21 years old. Like, there was 5 generations wandering around here at the same time. She was married to Earl Grant. Anyways, I'm sorry, family. I'm trying to remember going back. But, yes, he was a preacher, and I grew up in this little church, and it's where I was saved. It's where my dad was saved. You know, like, it goes way back. The church was built in 1887, and, you know, anyways. So I grew up hunting and fishing, just like, you know, we just talked about. When it's hunting season, it's hunting season. Yeah. You know? So it's interesting that you bring that up. My uncle was, I think we all might be like this. We got that one uncle when we're a teen or early, you know, when we're kids, that he's just the baddest dude on the planet. Maybe it's your dad, maybe it's your granddad, whatever. But Uncle Jackie knew how to do all the stuff. He was the only guy. I mean, this was back in the 70s and 80s. You know, he was killing big deer. and there wasn't nobody deer hunting. And if they were sitting in the grass. Well, he's climbing with spikes up in a tree and sitting on a limb all day and killing giant bucks, turkeys, the whole thing, So he was going fishing or hunting all the time. So one Sunday after church, we're going to go catfishing. All right, let's go. So me and him and Dad jump in the truck, ride up to the dam. And so I don't know about you, but catfish are interesting creatures, but you got to really go dig for them pretty deep sometime. But there's one place that for some reason, there's great big ones and that they like to hang out, and that's by the dam.
Yep.
So Watts Bar Dam. So we jump in the boat. We go up to the dam. Uncle Jackie is very careful. He's very smart. He don't have bad gear. It works. He knows what he's doing. So we're up there fishing. What you do is you go up, and the locks are open, so that's these giant waterfalls falling over, and it's pushing the water out. Well, you go up not close. You go up 300 yards from the thing. You cut your motor off, and it pushes you away from the dam. You just coast down through there, and you drop to the bottom, and you put your livers or whatever, and you catch your catfish. So we pull up, and there's some guys over there waving. Well, what happens is once you get too close, that water will take you the opposite direction. That backdraft will pull the top water back to the dam. Well, these guys had gotten in there, and their boat had quit. And so Jackie says, put on life jackets, boys. I'll never forget this. I wouldn't be here today if it was not for this next moment. Literally. Like a lot of people say, boy, I wouldn't be here today if it wasn't for this or that. Like I 100% would not be here right now. So he said, Chris, grab the life jacket. So I grabbed 3 life jackets, threw one to my dad, one to him, and I put on the orange one, the one you put over your head and then you put the little strap. And he goes, no, give me that one. Put this one on. And he threw me the one that zips, right? And he just hooked that thing on his head. So in that moment, you don't go into that thinking anything's going to happen except for we're going to go up here and we're going to pull these guys out here. Well, as soon as we get there, these guys are freaking out, and I don't blame them because they're going towards this giant dam, right? And they're swinging a rope. So as soon as we get there, they throw the rope. Well, it doesn't get to us. Well, we got a rope ready, too. We throw ours to them. It's an easy handoff. I mean, it's rough water at this point. But they got the rope, and then Jackie and the motor stops. What in the world? This never happens, like it runs. Bang, 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 just would not start. We found out after the fact that first rope that came into the water, what are the odds, man? It wrapped around the prop. So, and I don't know about you, but I've skied and wakeboarded and tubed my whole life. I'm talking about hours and hours. The only time it's ever happened in my life. Of course, we try to pay close attention for it not to, but so that happened. Now we got 2 vessels just floating into the dam, and sure enough, it wasn't one of those things that you could think about, like, ooh, maybe we should jump out. Man, it happened like that. Yeah. And as soon as that water hits that boat, man, you're to the bottom of the river. I mean, straight to the bottom. So, you probably know more about hydro than I do, but that top layer is coming towards the water because it's sucking it down. Well, once you get down to the bottom, it just shoots you down the bottom of the river. So that life jacket I had on slowly brought me back up. And I'll never forget the amount of time and the amount of darkness down there, man, is a different deal. And, complete darkness and enough time to think, enough time to think about your life. And, of course, I was a kid. I was 15, so I hadn't had a whole lot of life behind me, But I'll never forget slowly seeing light. And I even took a couple of breaths, just under the water, just a, natural reaction thing. And so I popped up out of the water, and I looked back, and I'm like 200 yards from the dam at this point. That's a pretty good distance to go like that. And my dad's
a long ways.
Yeah, my dad's there, and he pops up, and he, I see him, and then we never saw Jackie. He never did come back up. And one of the other guys in the other boat was lost as well in that situation. And I always think about them because it was such a traumatic experience. And I never met the guys. I don't. To this day, I don't remember what their names are. I just know we shared a very extreme situation there, but yeah, that was the story about that. And the song "I Saw the Light" stuck in my head. I remember riding in the ambulance, which I was okay. You know, I had a cut on my arm, and I took in a little water, but I was all right. But I remember riding in that thing singing "I Saw the Light" because I remember how it got a little lighter as it came up. But I don't know. I'm not ever going to try to go back to that situation and be like, well, there was a reason for this and for that, because, man, I love my Uncle Jackie.
Yeah, man.
And my cousins that were his kids, I love them like brothers and sisters, So I don't know. I don't know how to wrap that back around to, well, God had a purpose for me or any of that kind of stuff. It was just, that's something that I went through, many years ago now. But, yeah.
Man, what a story, man.
Well,
I mean,
it is. And I guess I should say this for sure. Man, if y'all are out there fishing around the dam, do not take it lightly. It's not a joke, Anything can happen. So, and I think they try to put stuff into play out there around, TVA or whoever the Corps is to keep you. But at the end of the day, you make your own decisions on that stuff. And I tell you what, man, if you seriously, anybody, I know a lot of guys that hunt and fish listen to your show. Anybody that's listening, man, make sure your stuff's working right before you go out there and put it into that situation, So,
how did that? Because you had received the gift of salvation. Mm-hmm. You had been baptized in the Tennessee River, right? Yeah. Was your uncle also saved?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
How did, at 15 to lose someone like that, and then also to think that you might not make it out of this thing yourself,
right?
Like you said, have time. Was there a point that you did you think that, or
oh yeah, absolutely.
You were like,
that's it.
Like, this is it, man.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
That can be a gift to experience what it feels like to really think you're about to die.
Yeah.
That can be a gift that changes the trajectory of your life potentially.
Yeah.
Did that impact you at all in any unique way as a young man? Do you feel like that? How did you move forward from that?
That's a good question. I was so young, that it affected the community. Like, small town, man. It was a huge deal. It affected my family greatly too. For me personally, that's a good question. That may be something I needed to unpack a little bit.
Yeah, man.
What effect did that have on me? I'm going to guess, because I was 15 and throughout high school, man, I battled back and forth between the flesh and the word and the flesh and the word. I didn't understand what I was reading, but I just kept my nose in it, and struggled. I think a lot of kids struggle, but I do think that there were times that I thought, if he's gonna keep me hanging around, there might be a reason for it,
Yeah.
But I also didn't want to play into that too much because, I don't know.
It makes sense because especially at that young age, you don't generally have thoughts like that, or even the beginnings of thoughts like that.
Oh, you're right.
If I'm here, there's a, and this is obviously coming from a young man who has faith in Christ. If I'm here, there's probably a reason I'm here. You don't have thoughts like that when you're that young because you don't yet understand the fragility of life.
Yeah.
But you being in that situation where you thought you were going to potentially die, and then you experience the loss of your uncle, and you look. I'm sure you even said you looked up to him. He was strong. He was skilled. He was squared away.
Yeah.
And he was still subject to losing his life.
Absolutely.
And so that experience allowing you to then have this new perspective as a young man, that, man, there's probably some purpose for me if I'm still here.
I now that I look back at it, there were a lot of, it definitely affected my whole life, but for sure those years, those school years, you know.
Yeah, it had to, man. Yeah, because I didn't have those thoughts when I was young like that, man. And even early on in my career as a SEAL, I didn't think anything could kill me, man. You know, for the longest time, I mean, I do the craziest stuff, man, whether it's jumping out of airplanes at night or, you know, long-range transits through big ocean in a little Zodiac and crazy stuff, dude. People ask me all the time, hey, you ever feel like you might die? And I'm like, well, I was doing things all the time when I was young that would have easily killed me.
Right.
But I just didn't think I didn't think nothing could kill me, man.
Yeah.
Until I started attending these memorial services for guys that would die, you know, that did lose their life either in combat or in training. And it's like there was a good span of time during my career where for a good span of years there, I was going to sometimes 5 or 6 of these memorial services for guys that I knew,
right?
You know, in the span of a year.
Man.
And these were young, strapping men who were way better operators than me.
Right.
You know, and then it started to sink in. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I am subject to dying here, and if I am still around here, it's probably God's got a purpose for me, and I probably need to be seeking that purpose.
I'm going to guess that when you guys go through what you go through, and it's training, and ain't nobody dying, people are tapping out, you know, and doing. But you get through that, you probably feel pretty invincible, and then you haven't had to experience what it actually looks like and feels like to see that happen. So I'm going to guess for that guy, once he does see it happen, it's kind of like, oh, this for real.
Yeah, man.
Yeah, man.
Yeah, something else. Well, thank you for sharing that with us. And
well, no, thank you for bringing that up, because I don't talk about that. And it's been many, many years. And every time we go across that dam, even to this day, man, I think deeply about it.
I bet.
But I have, you know, that was many years ago. So it's, you know, I appreciate you bringing that up. I probably ought to circle back around and really kind of dig into what did that affect, you know, how, because as a kid, as a 15-year-old, we're pretty selfish, you know, I mean, and we are thinking about ourselves, and, you know, I think that we've still got a lot to learn, which we still do, even at, you know, at 50, I've still got a whole long ways to go, but especially back then too, there was a lot of selfishness, but there was also a lot of family, like, there was just a lot of heartbreak in that stuff, you know.
Yeah,
but
there's something there.
Yeah,
for sure.
Maybe it reveals itself later in life.
Yeah, for sure, man. No rush.
Yeah.
When did music come into the picture?
For me, was in high school, and man, I know where we're heading with this, and it ends up turning into a lot to unpack because of what gets us into liking music, and then, you know, especially once you kind of get into it like I have and got really deep into it, you start to see the different layers. So when I got into it, I was in high school, and I got into it because, as you probably know, man, when you're a teenager and you turn that radio up and it's the right song at the right time, there ain't nothing like that in the world.
Yeah, your music's a powerful thing, man.
I'm telling you, I'll never forget the first time that not the first time I heard, because as a kid you hear Leonard Skinner your whole life, but the first time I really heard Sweet Home Alabama, of all things, just the simplest thing. We hear it 10 times a day if we're not careful. But I was in the back of, my dad would drive me and my buddies down to Daytona in the back of an old pickup truck. That's how we'd get there. We'd put a camper top on, and me and my buddy would get in the back of the truck and ride 10 hours to Daytona in the back of that truck. And we had a little jam box with batteries in it. And we would turn that thing on. And I'll never forget, man, the sun was setting, and we're going to the beach, and dun, 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 and I turned it up, and I'm like, oh, that feeling, you know, that thing. I say all of that to come back around to when I got into music was in high school with my band, you know, with me and some guys I was in school with. We just threw a band together, and we'd play that song and a lot of other ones. And that's what got me into it, was that feeling of like, we can do what comes through that radio and makes you feel that way. I can do it, you know. Now, it wasn't really, I'm going to do this for a living at that point, but that's what really got the bug that got me, you know, was was playing with that little band and playing those 10 songs that we knew how to play. So
did you start with singing, or did you start with learning an instrument?
Singing,
okay.
Because we were at my buddy's house, again, high school, and him playing guitar and a bass player and a drummer, and they're just jamming and nobody's singing. I'm like, you got to have somebody to sing.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it's not like I was just, you know, Pavarotti, but I thought, well, I know the words. I'll jump in there and start singing. So that's kind of what got it started. And then I had to learn how to play guitar because, man, that's cool, you know.
Well, I mean, when you first started singing, did you sound good? I mean, I've always wondered that. Do you have is there a natural talent for singing, or is it something that people learn how to do?
Well, there's a whole episode worth of conversation in that one right there. I think each individual case is different. If you wake up one morning and you're a 17-year-old Chris Stapleton, you ain't going to have to work real hard to be a good singer. That dude just oozes out of him, you know? Mm-hmm. That was not me. So I had to, and I'm not trying to say I eventually got to the level of singer as Chris Stapleton. I'm not saying that, of course. But I feel like for some people it just comes out of you natural, and for some people it's something that you just have to love and work at and improve upon. But I do think that ear is a big part of it. Like if you can hear tone, like if you can hear if you're out of key, or that's a big place to start, you know.
Yeah.
And so I think ears have a lot to do with singing. I think a lot of people don't, they take that for granted. But
did you have that naturally?
I did not have a problem finding I'm out of key or I'm in the right spot or not. So that's a good place to start, if nothing else, you know.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's kind of when the singing stuff got going.
At what point did you realize, okay, I'm pretty good at this?
I'm still trying to realize that. I realized once I got into Nashville and really dug in, I think to answer that, I'll have to go back a little bit.
Yeah, because you had to have thought you were decent but to go to Nashville.
Right, in the first place. Yeah, a lot to unpack. So I wouldn't have moved to Nashville if I looked in the mirror or I listened to myself and thought, man, you don't need to do that. So, yeah, I felt pretty confident, but I always knew that I could improve. I always knew that these guys that I hear singing that I'm such a fan of, I want to get to a level where I sound like that recorded, you know. So, yes, I did. I felt pretty confident in it, and that's why I moved to Nashville in the first place. But I also knew when I got there, like, I'm going to have to really put my nose down and work hard to get up to the level of these guys that I hear over here.
Who were those guys for you back then that you were looking up to?
So I always loved Don Williams. And it's not like I just think about this all the time. I'm just off the top of my head. And Waylon and these baritone guys.
Yeah, man.
And the fact that they could talk and it sounded awesome.
And Waylon live too.
Yes.
I mean, he sounds the same as he sounds in a studio, in my opinion.
Oh yeah, I know. So I love those guys. That's just to name a few. I mean, I can sit here and rattle off a bunch of them. But I will say that it did occur to me. It took me a while to realize that my cadence or my pitch is not where theirs is. I don't sing in the same range as they do. As hard as I wanted to and as much as I wanted to. I would even get into this Don Williams phase as a songwriter where I was like, man, you know how mellow his stuff is, you know, and like how his voice drives everything. And I would write towards that and try to sound not like him. I'm not trying to be him. But I just loved how that made me feel so much, so I'm really going to try to focus on that. And it's like, man, my voice just doesn't sound like his does, you know.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering, too, when it comes to like Waylon, you know, he had that baritone thing, but he also smoked a lot of cigarettes, too, so that played into it, too, you know. There was a lot of factors in there.
Yeah.
But those were the guys, yeah. Generally speaking. There was, you know, a lot of others, too. I always liked – so Willie's a whole different kind of deal. You know, it's a different tone to his voice. But
there's nobody else like him.
But it's so original, right?
Yeah.
And that's right. It's so original that you're like, well, that's kind of cool too, you know.
Even just his cadence, how he doesn't sing like right on step with the band and like.
Yeah.
There's nobody else like him, man.
No, there's not.
I mean, I don't even like his voice that much, but I'll listen to his music just because it's so unique.
Yeah, it is.
You know?
It's raw. Yeah, I agree.
But I got you sidetracked. So you knew you had some talent, but you knew you needed to improve.
Yeah.
But that's a big leap, man, to leave Decatur, Tennessee, and drive up and try to make a place in Nashville.
A lot of that, and it's funny we're talking about it today because I've had some revelations recently. And so there's this 22, 23-year-old guy that's making all these big decisions that the 50-year-old guy on down the road is going to have to live with. Now, I'm not knocking it. I'm blessed and I'm thankful for where I am right now. But I think that's something a lot of people need to remember, you know, is that whatever you're deciding to do today, especially if it's big decisions like that, you know, like it's going to be with you 25 years from then.
I got lucky on that one.
Well, right. And frankly, I did too, to be honest with you, but I've had a lot of scales to shed though along the way, but I'm going the wrong direction. So yes, moved to Nashville and had to work hard. What was the, I got lost. What was the?
Yeah, like when did you realize like, okay, I'm pretty good at this?
Yeah.
Like maybe I can carve out a living doing this.
So when I got to town, those open mics I was talking about was step one. Like you're going to go do these things because you want to. For me, it wasn't so much a competition against the other writers or the other singers or the new artists that came to town. For me, it was a competition with myself. Like, can you do this? You know, like go, because I'm going to tell you right now, I've done a lot of things that I've been nervous to do. I mean, a lot of the Jamie stuff we've done, you know, butterflies and nervous. Nothing that I've ever done has made me more nervous than being the new guy in town in Nashville, sitting at the Bluebird Cafe with 50 people quietly watching you sing your song you just wrote. That, I'm telling you, man. So if I didn't feel like I did well in that setting, I would drive to the next one that same night. There's another open mic down here. I beat myself up. I didn't do well. I'm going to go do it again. And I feel like that persistence, you're kind of beating yourself up a little in that case, but also you're learning, you're getting better, you're learning, you're getting better. So finally, I was doing a open mic night at, it was called the Gibson Cafe, and it was on Broadway. It's not there anymore. And so you'd go in and put your name down, and they'd be like, okay, we'll call you. Well, I finally started to learn that they're going to call me like 2 hours from now because I'm way down the list. So I'd go down to Tootsie's or Robert's, you know, down there and sit and listen to these bands play. Guitars, just the best players in the world. I mean, back then, it's a little different. Now I think it's spread a little more thin now. There's like 50 bars where there used to be 5, you know. But I'd walk in, and there's Brent Mason, there's, you know, all of these guys that are playing on every record you hear now, you know, there they are. And that's what I was drawn to, like the band. And so I finally quit doing the writers' rounds and I went to Broadway, and I was like, this is where I'm going to learn right here. So you walk into Tootsie's, for instance, and you're like, hey, how do I play here? And the bartender's like, go talk to John. So you go talk to John. He's like, okay, can you be here at 2 o'clock in the afternoon on Thursday? And I'm like, yeah. So now I got to go find a band, you know, just throw something together. Yeah. And now I got to play for 4 hours straight, you know, in this place and just make it up as we go, you know. So that's where most of my, you know, education came from in the music business, was right down
Boots on the ground, son.
Hardcore.
Yeah.
And learning lessons that so many artists today, I'm not talking about all of them, but I know that there are many artists today that didn't go through that stuff. And so it shows up a lot of times in shows because you'll see them kind of freak out if something doesn't go right, you know. Yeah, monitors go out or whatever. Well, man, I'm used to, there ain't none of this stuff I ain't seen before. So,
well, man, you bring up a good point. It's so much different. It's got to be so much different today than it was when you were coming up. like you said, just grinding, just hustling, just boots on the ground, doing live performances time after time. I assume you weren't making much money.
Oh,
I mean,
Lord.
some of them you were probably doing for free, just to have the opportunity, or losing money, just to have the opportunity to play and to practice. But nowadays you have YouTube, and you have guys like, let's take Oliver Anthony. He's the most recent example.
Yeah,
a guy that has, as far as I know, was completely unknown. I mean, I don't know. I don't think he was in Nashville following that same path you were talking about you guys had to follow. And this isn't taken away from him.
No,
it's just saying how much different it is.
Yeah.
And this guy can write literally one song and put it out on YouTube, and all of a sudden it's like he's a star, man.
Yeah. It's unbelievable.
Like he's again, don't take this the wrong way.
Yeah.
But he skipped all that grind that you're talking about. And so I've always wondered how that affects him in particular too, just using him as an example. Like, when you get that much that quick, how do you wield that? You know what I mean? And I watched this dude and the song that he wrote, and it's an amazing song. But I watched this dude just coming out of nowhere, and like a week into his career, he's on the Joe Rogan podcast. And I'm like, how do you wield that, man? And I think he's done a pretty good job. But I can't imagine that happening that fast, and then being able to wield it, and then being able to bring that into a place that is sustainable long-term for you as a musician. You know what I mean? I just feel like building the way you guys had to build back then, it becomes a more sustainable thing, because you're learning all these lessons along the way and over the course of years and years, and you're meeting people and you're making contacts, and you know, it's just different.
It is different. And as I have learned through this process, every story's different. Some are a little more alike than others, but man, everybody's got their own thing. And I was fortunate that a lot of those lessons that I had to learn, I learned them in front of 5 to 10 people. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
You know, in his case, I have no idea. I'm not going to pretend to know what he's gone through or what he's going through, but man, he's had to do it in front of a very large audience.
I know, it's wild.
And that's got to be tough. That's got its own set of circumstances. It seems like he's handled it pretty well, though. Like, he's not just let it completely, you know.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. It's been really cool to just kind of see him be able to stay true to himself. You know what I mean? At least from what we get to see.
From what we get to see, right? We don't know. We don't know.
But I just, for me, so, you know, in 2019, nobody knew who I was, and it's taken me, 5 years to get to the point that I am now. And I just can't imagine having what I have now, which is way less than what he has to wield in terms of following and stuff like that. But I can't imagine having what I have now and getting that back in 2019 and getting that over the course of about a week or something. It would destroy me, man.
How about that? That's
it would
a good
destroy
way
me.
to look at it. Yeah.
I just couldn't wield it.
Well, you don't know. You don't know.
Well, it would have to have been miraculous.
Yeah.
For me to wield that.
I know. I get it, man. I think about, which we didn't dive off into this, but I think about my plight in my career often. Oh, I guess everybody does. And how there's only so many things you can control. It's that way with anything in life, but just specifically in this music business, there's only so many things you can do. You can work as hard as you can work, and you can put yourself in the best positions you can put yourself in. But at the end of the day, there's just some things you can't control. And I have watched people that, I mentioned that earlier. There was a bunch of us that were on the starting line at the same time. And it's funny. One might think, then you say go and everybody takes off running and there's a finish line and we all are just trying to get to it and who gets there first, you know, and all this stuff. It's almost not like that. it's almost like go happens and then everybody just scatters because they've got their own finish line in mind. It's not just this one thing. And I think a lot of times I thought of it like we're all trying to get to this same goal, but really, man, 25 years later, you realize, man, everybody's doing their own thing and everybody had their own start.
That's interesting, man.
Oh yeah, I mean, I could get going on the layers of this music business thing and why we do it in the first place. You know, like there's a lot to unpack there.
I'm so interested in it, dude. I mean, I watched a whole documentary series about a month ago from Ken Burns, and it's on country music.
Oh yeah, it's great.
So you've seen it.
Oh man, yeah.
And it goes all the way back to the Carter family, and then just follows all the way up now to mostly modern day Garth Brooks and those guys. And it just, to me, it seems so brutal. I mean, it seems like such a brutal industry and such just a difficult path to walk.
It is.
When you watch that documentary, it gives you a whole new appreciation about it, and you're hearing the story of, you know, Hank Williams Jr. and you know, him finding some boy to drive him up to a show, you know, overnight, and he ends up dying in the car because he overdoses on morphine and whatever, alcohol, whatever else he was putting into his body. And there's so many stories like that. But when you, even just looking at your life, so I got on your website and looked at your schedule. That's brutal. That's brutal, man.
Yeah.
Like, what has kept you going? I mean,
oh, that's a good question.
You talk about why we do this. I mean, that's a good question. I mean, something's got to be driving you to be able to maintain that pace.
It's hard. There's so much depth to why it is not just me, but why we do what we do, right? And music, it's tough, man. It's a tough thing to unpack all of it because I'm still in the learning process of myself, you know. But why do we get into music in the first place? Why, you know, did God put us there to do this thing? And so I feel like our fuel, a lot of people's fuel could be that. Like, well, God gave me the drive to want to do this, and that's why I want to do it for Him. And it's like, man, I don't know, man. I think God just tells us to wake up and to praise Him, and He'll take care of the next steps that we want to do. But we get our own ambitions and desires in the way of what it is that He's wanting us to do. Now, again, it's difficult for me to talk about because there's so many angles on it. There's so much depth to it that I get a little lost sometimes because I'm trying to lean on my own understanding. I'm trying to go back to if I can't understand it, then it must not be right. And it's like I can almost hear Him going, shh, trust in me. So music it's such a self-fulfilling thing. But it's not at the same time because people hear music and they get so much from it, you know. But for the person that's making the music, they got to be so careful to not go, I'm doing this because I want to be famous. I'm doing this because I want to be rich. I'm doing this because I want to be well-known and respected in all the communities, you know. And everybody has different driving forces, but if you really, really tear down into it, I think that anybody that's trying to get into the music business should ask themselves, why am I really doing this? What is the purpose and what's the point behind it? And they may not be able to answer it like that, but I think they should continually ask themselves that. And then if I go deep enough down this rabbit hole, I will eventually find myself going, well, we should ask that about everything we do every day, not just do I want to get in the music business. What do I want to say to this person that I'm about to shake hands and talk to? What do I want to do with my day? You know, it's a lot to unpack.
well, when you're performing, from my perspective, it looks like you're pouring yourself out into other people.
Yeah.
Right? And so when I go and speak, which is the closest I'll ever get to a performance, I'm on a stage with a microphone and I'm speaking. So for me personally, when I'm done with a speech, I'm exhausted. Mm-hmm. I don't want to talk to anybody. I want to lay down in the back of my Suburban, and I just want to rest in silence on the way home.
Yeah.
That's how it affects me personally.
Right.
But for you as a musician, for you personally, is it filling you up? I mean, are you when you come off the stage, are you feeling do you feel exhausted, or do you feel energized, and is it filling you up? Because I see videos of you on stage and it looks like you're having a blast. Mm-hmm. It looks like you're operating within the space that God has created you to operate.
Yeah, it's a great point. The answer to that is energy. Like typically, well, there's an energy in the room, right?
Yeah.
You know, you get out there and you're speaking and you feel like, man, these guys are just trying to get the lunch. They're just here because they're happy, or whatever it might be. I've
experienced that, especially speaking to the church.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So at the end of that, you walk off going, what am I doing? You know, I'm not speaking for you, but I imagine so that happens with music as well. You know, there's some gigs where you're like, there's not energy and you question yourself, you know, like, but a lot of them, yes, there's a great amount of energy, and it's very self-fulfilling. Like,
okay.
And it feels great, you know, like to really kick butt and do a great show. It's just a great feeling. So, and then I also feel like that there is an energy that is passed from them to you and from you to them that man, you can tell they're having a good time. And how blessed should we be in our lives? Man, I feel like there's a lot of things that we've created in this world that are just big headaches. But I know God created music. Now, what we do with it's up to us, you know. But there's no question that he wants music to be there to glorify him. But I feel like that he wants music to be there for us to interact and to feel and enjoy, you know. So when I see a crowd that really gets into it and enjoys it, it definitely makes me feel like I've done something good in the world today, you know. So
that's interesting, man. And I think that you have to be special. You have to have something unique about you, in you, to be able to experience it the way you're talking about experiencing it. Because I don't experience it that way. Yeah. And that's why performing would never be, unless something changed about, you know, the way I operate, performing would never be a sustainable thing for me. Like if I had to do speaking engagements at the rate you
I see what you're saying.
Perform shows.
Yeah, I see what you're saying.
It would be it would probably like put me in a really bad place. Like I would have to lean so hard on the Lord, which I already do every time I get up and speak. I have to just Lord, just get me through this because it wears me out.
Right.
But for you, and I think I know a few other people like you who are able to get up and to do your thing and perform and you feel good about it, right? At the end. And see, I don't get that when I speak, even if the Lord uses me and gives me the right words, and I feel like I trusted in him enough that the delivery was exactly what it needed to be in order to reach the people that he sent me to speak to. I don't feel energized.
No?
I thank him for it.
Yeah.
But I'm still like, all right, I need a week off, man.
Yeah.
It's wild, man.
But
so that's something special about you, man.
It is, but what if you did it? What if you had to? Like, what if man, I got to do it Thursday, Friday, Saturday every week.
If I'm ever called to do it at that frequency, then yes, I will go.
Yeah.
I will go.
Yeah.
And the beautiful thing about that is all it would do is force me to rely on the Lord more than I ever have before.
This will come back around to my question. Let me ask you this. Why do you do it? Why do you do the speaking engagements?
I do it. I do it because, essentially, the Lord has given me a unique testimony. He's given me the unique ability to do some really difficult things and the unique opportunity to learn a lot of really interesting lessons at a young age that some people will live a lifetime and never learn.
Right.
And then they suffer through their whole lives because they don't learn these lessons that I've learned in a very short amount of time. And so if I didn't share that, like, what a disservice to what God has given me.
To have it and not share.
Yeah, what a disservice, man. Like, and then I feel like I'm gonna be when I stand before the throne of God, I'm gonna be like that servant that Jesus describes in the parable, that, you know, that the master gave him a quarter when he left, and the servant went and buried that quarter in the ground and said, you know, I didn't want to lose none of it, so I didn't share it, I didn't invest it, I didn't do anything with it, but I still got your quarter, man. Right. Thank you for giving me all that. And then he sends you packing.
Yeah, it's funny how my mindset's changed through the years, because I remember reading that passage, and before I got to the end of it, whatever the reason was, I was reading it at that moment for the first time, I remember thinking, oh, I thought the guy that hit it was going to be all right.
Same here, man.
I did. And I think that tells a lot about our natural state of, and I'm not, of course, saying that you're fearful, but for me personally, of fear. You bury it because you're like, man, when he gets back, I want to make sure I have it.
Yeah, yeah.
And what a great parable, because I'm so thankful that he says, no, I want you to go to work.
Yeah.
I want you to do this. So the reason I ask you why you do it, and that's the answer I assumed that it would be, and that's not that there's a right answer, but there kind of is. That's the right reason to do something. So you asked me earlier, what keeps me going? Why do I keep doing it at 50? Well, this 23, 24-year-old had a goal of what I was going to do with my career, my life. And I was single. I was just wide open. The world was wide open to me, you know. And so I set this goal. So I tend to be very goal-oriented. So I'm pushing for this thing, you know. Just regardless, I'm going to go just wide open for this thing. All of a sudden, you wake up and you're going for it, and you're 50, right? And so this might be a big revealing moment right here, but what drove me all these years was that thing, that goal. Now, granted, along the way, I love music, so I'm not trying to say it, because at the end of the day, I'm wondering sometimes if we're not all better off in a small community with guitars and banjos on the front porch and enjoy them on Friday night and then go back to work. But this thing's turned into a business, and it's a job. So my goal was to reach this height of a songwriter, as a singer, as an artist. Well, all of a sudden you wake up one day and you go, wow, whether you actually achieve that goal or don't achieve that goal, once you do achieve it, because I've got a bunch of buddies that have gotten to a certain place, well, they just want the next goal and the next goal. Yeah. You don't stop and go, well, I made it, I'm good. And then for me, it was, I'm not quite there. I got to keep pushing. I got to keep pushing. And so like when I said this, maybe this is a revealing thing, is that I'm kind of got to a point now where I'm like, what was the point? What was I trying to achieve? What am I trying to achieve? Because it's not like I've achieved I think Paul said it. It's not, I don't count myself to have finished the race. I'm still, but this one thing I do is forgetting what's behind me and move forward.
Yeah.
God came in and said, what are you doing it for? Why are you doing this? And so if you ask me, which you did, what keeps you going? Well, just like I asked you and you gave the answer, because God's given you this stuff and you need to get it out in the world. Well, I feel like he's really working in me right now going, you know, your goal was not correct. You know, your goal was self-serving. And until you're willing and able to let that come out of your mouth and accept it, I'm going to have a hard time taking you to the next place that you need to go. So now, and again, man, I'm cold chilling, because now here I am with 26 years of doing this thing. I've still got my guitar sitting here. I'm still writing songs. But it's like, well, hold on. What am I doing it for, you know? And I feel like that I have come to that point, the new haircut version of me, of it's time to glorify him, man. And it doesn't say, I thought about this on the way down here. I'm going all over the place.
You're good, man.
But I thought about this on the way down here. If it was a pie chart, and I like charts and percentages, I don't know what that means about me, but if there was a pie chart and it said you got your wife, you got your business, you got God, how much of a percentage of your 100%, I'm not asking you to answer this, I'm asking myself, how much of that 100% that you have available to give goes to him? And so I ask myself that question, and I'm not ready to answer it with specific numbers, but I can tell you that he wants 100, and I don't give him 100, and I'm learning how to give him 100, but until we learn how to let go of this stuff, and this all falls back into what we're talking about with music or whatever these things are that are keeping us held back, that with our own understanding we think makes sense, but with his understanding don't. All those things are keeping us from giving him that 100. And then you go, wife, family, business? Yes, yes, yes. Children? Yes, 100%. He wants you, and he does not want you to keep those things. He wants you to give them to him.
Yeah.
And until we do that, he's going to have a real hard time. No, he doesn't have a hard time doing anything. We're going to have a hard time following the path that he wants us to follow.
Yeah.
So that kind of all comes back around into what keeps me going and why do I keep doing it. I'm in the process right now of asking that same question, And
that's huge. I mean, I don't know if the listeners can really put themselves in your shoes when you said, here I reached a point where I realized I had 26 years and the whole time my goals were wrong.
Yeah.
And it's time for me to admit that, and I have to admit that to myself in order to move forward.
Yeah.
That's heavy stuff right there, buddy.
It's really heavy, and it comes at it comes with a risk because I don't really know where it leads.
Yeah.
It's a step off the cliff.
Well, I am so interested just to continue following you and to see what happens to the music part of you.
Me too. Me too.
Because if I had to guess, the music doesn't. The music's not going to go away.
No.
If I had to guess, it probably. I could see the Lord leading you into a place where the music is better than it's ever been before.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
I do know what you mean, but I have to be careful to get amped up about that.
Oh, yeah. 100%.
You know why?
You have to be at all the time, man, with so many aspects, not only just music. I was thinking about this the other day, and it's right in line with what you're saying. Even our prayer, it's so easy for us. Jesus told us how to pray.
Yeah.
We have the prayer that Jesus laid out for us. Well, I'm pretty good with words, all right? And I love to pray. Mm-hmm. The Lord's brought me into a place just within maybe the last year where I really enjoy praying. Well, over a couple of months, I was spending a lot of time in prayer, and I got pretty good at praying. I thought I'd say a prayer, and I'd get done, and I'd say, man,
that's pretty good.
Boy, I nailed that.
Yeah.
So I know the Lord heard that one, right?
Yeah. You've impressed him.
And you know what I ended up doing? I just said, you know what? No more of that. Yeah. I'm going to say the Lord's Prayer.
Our Father, right, yeah. Yeah.
I mean, you just have to, every step of the way, you're having to allow the Holy Spirit to show you where yourself is starting to come back up, right?
Yes.
And then you got to kill it, man. That's what could happen too. Like you said, if you were anticipating, now I'm making this transition. The Lord's bringing me through this transition. He's the Holy Spirit showing me what my purpose really is. And now your expectations are, okay, the music is now, it's going to get better than it's ever been. Like you can't, no, man, you have to constantly be on guard about that.
I have thought so much about this stuff. And that's why earlier when I don't know how it comes off, recorded, because there's a chance I get tongue tied or I'd get twisted. It's because, man, I'm having this battle between what I think and what I understand and what I know the Spirit's telling me, right? So you were saying, like, you have to, this thing sneaks back in. And for some people who are, you know, I feel like our enemy knows your weaknesses and exploits them. And for some people, it's weakness. For some people, it's pride. For some people, it's this. Everybody's got their own thing, whatever it might be. And we're talking about Ephesians 6 earlier, which kind of drove my whole thing with fully armed. That's what it's referring to, is to be put on the full armor of God. But even in that, it's funny because as much as I love the full armor and the visual that goes with the breastplate of righteousness and, you know, the sword of the Spirit, my favorite part of Ephesians 6 is the first part, not the first part, but it says, our battle is not against flesh and blood. And this is my go-to. It's against principalities. It's against the forces of darkness in heavenly places. And the more I latch into that and remember that that's who I'm fighting here, and that is within me, it's within you, it's within all of us. Yeah. You got to know your enemy, right, before you really know how to attack it. And he knows the enemy better than we ever will. But, man, that part of Ephesians, that our battle is against spiritual things, that plays in so much to, man, I watch you guys. I know what you talk about, you know, and I'm with you. There's so much craziness going on in the world, you know. And we get so mad at this guy and this girl and that guy, and that we get so upset and so tangled at that person and that figure, when in the reality, man, they're just flesh and blood. I mean, they're just a person. It's the spiritual principalities working through them and us that the battle's against.
And how often do we forget that?
Every day.
Every day.
Yeah.
I mean, how often have I showed up on this podcast and totally forgot that?
Yeah.
That's been the furthest thing from my mind.
Mm-hmm.
And then so then I sit here and I go railing against illegal immigrants and against some politician and against these people, right? And never to mention what's actually driving it all,
right?
Which is the spiritual hosts of wickedness behind all of this. And I'm guilty. You know what, man, listening to the Fully Armed podcast this morning, it was a wake-up call for me, man. In that very first episode, when you read Ephesians chapter 6, it made me consider how often I come here and I'm fighting a fight, but I'm not fighting the fight in an effective manner because I've lost sight of the reality of where the actual battle is happening, even though I know that.
Yeah.
I know it. I understand it. I believe it.
Yeah.
But my flesh gets in the way, and, you know, it just and it renders me ineffective.
Well, you're effective. I mean, yeah, that's a whole nother. Well, you know what? I don't know if this is the right way to go with this, but I think this can maybe make our point. There's a guy hiding in the wood or in the bushes, right? You know, this, I don't know when this is going to come out, but this is a pretty hot topic right now. There's a guy hiding in the bushes. Well, everybody wants to know, why is he there? Whose team is he on, and why is he trying to take out, you know, this guy? And the fact is, we want to know all the details. When the details are right there in front of us, man, it's battle is against principalities and the spiritual forces in heavenly realms that have driven whatever it has, taken itself down to that guy right there. Yep. And so we can go hate on all this other stuff, but facts are the facts, man. Those people are driven by these forces. And man, as you know, you and I are too. It's not like we're trying to call out, you know, this person or that person. We all are in the middle of it. But until a person knows their enemy, they have a real hard time beating them. Mm-hmm. And so we have to know that our enemy is what it says in Ephesians chapter 6.
You are exactly right. It's the only way to fight effectively against the things that we see manifesting themselves in our physical world.
Yeah.
The only way to battle effectively.
Now, that being said, I don't want to lose sight in the fact that Jesus did not just yell at demons. I mean, he said, you brood of vipers, you know, he's talking to the powers that be in Jerusalem at the time. And so it's not like, you know, he had his way to deal with the humans too, you know, like there were things that needed to be said to these people, you know. So there is a balance in there, I think. But I think that knowing the root of why this person is doing what they're doing and saying what they're saying is the key to success and how to deal with the person.
Also the key, it's the key to bringing that awareness to them so that then they have the opportunity to repent from that and change the direction they're going, right?
Yes.
I mean, it's essentially an example is the example of me listening to your show this morning.
Yeah.
And that scripture impacting me in that way, you know?
Yeah, it's
if you would have came to me and said, oh, Chad, you need to quit saying the things you're saying because you're hurting people's feelings and it's politically incorrect, and I wouldn't have heard it, but you come to me with the truth and you come to me with scripture and you come to me in love, and you did all that through the airwaves. I'd never even met you before.
Right. So that's the thing that I've tried to – one of the driving forces and why I wanted to do Fully Armed was because of the information that's floating around out in the world, right? Like, and we see it daily. I mean, news, come on. I mean, you can't watch the news and expect to actually get news. And I thought, okay, well, I have a lot of opinions, but at the end of the day, that book right there is where I'm going to get my opinions from.
Yeah.
And so as long as I keep that as my target, like that is the target, then I'm going to share how I feel. And just like we talked about earlier, I'm going to miss it from time to time. You're going to miss it from time to time. But that's okay, man, because we have a target that we're aiming for, and which I'm not trying to play into, you know, targets. I know that plays into your world a lot, but I guess it does kind of make sense, though, that's what the whole thing was driven, by, was the fact that there's so much misinformation.
The very first, when you look at the fundamentals of marksmanship, the very first fundamental is sight picture, making sure that you're looking at the target that you want to hit, and making sure that your sights are aligned on that target where you want to hit it at.
Yeah,
that's the very first fundamental of marksmanship.
Right.
So you're exactly right. It's having that target in focus and making sure your sights are aligned on that target.
Yeah.
And I have whole seasons where I'm not even looking at the target. I'm just shooting the berm.
Yeah.
I'm just wasting bullets, man. I have whole seasons.
One of the best lessons I ever learned. I'm a bird hunter, and I grew up quail hunting back when there were actually quail. There's not in East Tennessee much anymore, but and I get so frustrated and so mad when I missed, you know. So I finally had a buddy. We go trap shooting, right? And so my thing was, I would look and see where it's coming from. Okay, it's going to come from over there. All right, I'm going to look up here, and I'm going to pull. And then here it comes, and then I'm going to try to shoot it, and I miss it. Finally, the guy was like, no, man, you got to watch it every second. You got to watch where it's coming from over here to hit it, you know. And so the day that I started watching it come out of that arm, and every, split second I'm watching it right up, man, it changed everything for me.
Yeah.
So knowing where something's coming from and not just kind of reacting because there it is.
All of a sudden it came into your view. Yeah.
Right. So, we got on to shooting, so I had to throw that little
it's
in.
good things, man, because that's the thing. These principles that we talk about in the spiritual realm, they play out in the natural too.
Yeah.
Like everything is essentially connected. The supernatural with the natural. The laws are essentially the same in both of those realms, and we can draw lines between how they play out and how we can see what we're talking about here in the natural world. We can see how important it is to keep our eye on the target. And it's the same thing when we're talking about battling these principalities and these powers in spiritual realms and keeping our eye on the target. And that target is the Holy Bible and the scripture that we have to guide us and direct us and tell us how to be effective. And, man, when we get outside the boundaries of that, we're just wasting our time, man.
Well, and you know, you and I, you know, listeners probably tend to generally agree with a lot of stuff we talk about, especially with the Bible. But there's a lot of people, you know, we're from the South, so we're kind of used to Bible Belt. Everybody knows about it. So my target is this scripture. A lot of people don't believe in that target. You know, they come from a different background, different belief system. My thing with that always is whether you believe in this scripture or not, and this target that I'm shooting at, there's nothing in this scripture and this target that is against you.
Yeah.
It's all peace. It's all love. It's all selflessness. So even if you don't believe in the same target that I'm shooting for, it's still good for you. Mm-hmm. And I still believe in it, and I'm still, at the end of the day, you know, I fight it all the time, but that's what I'm going to jump off the cliff with, is that word right there.
Yep.
So I bring that up because I know that it's easy for me and you in this room to talk about stuff we agree on, but there's a whole lot of people out there that don't agree with what we agree with that comes out of the scripture. Mm-hmm. But even if they don't agree with it, it's still good for them. It's still the reason that even though they don't like what I like, I don't hate them, because this thing tells me that's not my place to do that. You know?
Yep.
So the target's a good target.
Yeah, that's the truth, man.
Yeah.
That's the truth.
You said something, and I've thought about this for a couple of weeks now. I don't remember exactly when it was, but I love what you guys do. I said that earlier, but it was a truck talk, and you said, you know, the closer I get to my Heavenly Father, you know where I'm going with this?
Yeah, everything just gets dulled out, man.
Nothing makes sense. I don't remember exactly how you said it, but when you said it, that was the moment that I knew I'm going to get along with this guy.
Yeah.
Because the more that you get to that point to where you feel like a foreign creature.
Yep, that's exactly it. Yeah.
Yeah, and all the stuff that used to it made sense to you because you could intellect yourself into going, yeah, that's why I don't like this, or yeah, that's why I do like this. Even that stuff starts to not make that much sense anymore, you know?
I agree, man.
So when you said that, I've been meaning to say that and bring that up. It's like, I get it. I know what you're saying.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah, it's a powerful, powerful moment and a growing experience that I'm still growing through right now. You know, I have conflict in my own self about some of the things that some of the conversation I engage in, and some of that. And, yeah, man, I just pray continuously that Lord can form me into the likeness and image of your Son and reveal to me what I am doing to stand in the way of that, right? And reveal that to me so I can change it. You know,
right?
And that's a painful process.
Well, I think a lot of times we talked a little bit about this earlier, that people don't follow through because they pray. I mean, the most basic: Jesus, I'm a sinner, forgive me, and help me to be a better person. I believe in you. You wake up the next day and you still have that same addiction. You still have that same problem with that same person. It doesn't go away, and so people don't subscribe. They don't dig in enough.
Yeah.
Because they think, well, he's just going to fix everything, and tomorrow I'm going to wake up and everything will be fine. And it's like, that ain't how it works. You've been through enough training to know just because somebody sits and tells you something don't mean you know how to do it now.
In some way, shape, or form, we're an active participant, especially when it comes to that shield of righteousness that you talk about, and when you quote from Ephesians in the Fully Armed podcast, that shield of righteousness. You know, we're at a place in the American church where we can't even talk about righteous living anymore. Like we can't talk. Nobody wants you to talk to them about holiness.
Yeah.
Because if you challenge a brother to live a righteous life, well, you get called a hypocrite. You get called a Bible thumper. You know, and then you also get called a legalist right off the bat. Like, why are you challenging me to live a holy and a righteous life? I don't have to do that. Like, I'm saved by grace, right? Well, that's exactly right. You are saved by grace, but the evidence of your salvation it's worked out visibly in your life. There is evidence of your salvation. And why do we as men who have been called to be disciples of Christ, why do we need to be an active participant in trying to live a righteous life and a holy life? It's because when you receive the gift of salvation and you understand the gospel, you want everything that you do to honor God.
Yeah.
You want every word that you say. You want every video you post, every podcast you do. You want every interaction that you have. And now it's not going to be perfect, but your aim is that everything that you do is going to honor and glorify your Father in heaven.
Right.
And that He's glorified through you and your actions, and not because He needs it.
You don't need it.
He don't need it, but because we owe everything to Him.
Yeah.
And because He loved us perfectly, and He loves us every day perfectly. And so, man, I want to reciprocate that love, not because He needs it, but because that's my desire, right? I mean, I know that's not what's saving me.
Yeah. But
that's my desire, and that's why I want to live holy. But we don't challenge each other to do that anymore.
No, not.
I was talking to a young man the other day. I shared this on Resurrected. I won't go through the whole story, but essentially the man's sharing with me his testimony and all about how he believes in Christ and everything, and his girlfriend's standing there. And I said, well, thank you for all that. I said, this is your girlfriend, right? And the guy was complaining that he was a young man. The Lord's just not using me. I don't know what's wrong. I just feel like I'm kind of lost, And
yeah.
I said, that's your girlfriend, right? And he said, yeah. She'll be my wife one day, he said. I said, okay. I said, you guys been together for a while? Oh, yeah, we've been together. Well, and I asked him, have you guys abstained from sexual relationships while you guys have been together as boyfriend and girlfriend?
Yeah.
He was offended
that you asked
that I asked him that.
Yeah.
He wouldn't answer the question.
Right.
But it's like, no, man, so based off of what you told me, you're a brother in Christ. And so I'm going to challenge you as your brother to live a holy and righteous life in order to honor our Father in heaven. I'm going to challenge you to that, man. And I'm also challenging you to that because that's something I didn't do with my wife when we were boyfriend and girlfriend. Mm-hmm. And I wish I could go back and do it right and honor God with the relationship that He gave me and the person that He's given me in this life to live the rest of my life with. But I'll never have that opportunity to go back and honor God in that.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, man, we don't do that for each other. And which leads, if you got anything to say about that, feel free.
No. Really, the only thing I'd say about that in that situation is that kid's response tells. I've not got anything to do with the answer to your question. But the fact that he's not able to either say, well, no, we're not, or, yeah, we are, and that's something that we need to work on. That defense right there is the thing that does separate us from where it is that he wants us to go.
Yeah.
That defense. So that's something that stuck out as far as that conversation goes, but no.
Yeah. Yeah, and that was wild, man. Like, me asking him that question was totally Holy Spirit led because I am not a bold enough person to ask someone that question, or at least I haven't been in the past. You know what I mean? But I'm learning it matters. It matters.
It matters, and man, having accountability people around you is a big deal. I mean, it's just a huge deal. And heck, we're both, we know JD, and that's really one of the big reasons I'm here is JD Malone, and he's one of my guys. If I have something, and he and I we went to college together. He and I might not talk for 6 months, but buddy, when we do, it's okay because he'll call me out on something, and that's so important to have somebody that is willing to tell you might be missing this, and because without that, well, you know, we got God. He's going to direct us, but I think a lot of times he'll direct us to people that can give us the truth if we'll let them.
I know he has done that for me for sure. Yeah. I mean, it kind of leads me into the next thing I wanted to ask you, just about the industry that you've been in general. Obviously, the places that you have worked doing what you've done are not the easiest places to go as a disciple of Christ, and are just ripe with temptation from all these different angles. How has that affected you as a Christian? How have you encountered those temptations, and has it been a battle? And
yeah, so to answer that, if I'm not careful, again, I'll get too wound up and I'll forget my focus. So I'll try to go chronological. The sort of the point I want to make in this statement is that is roots. It's base. Where are you coming from? And thank God, because of generational love and servitude to him, that I had people that led me to God early. And then I had the roots. I spent a lot of my teen years learning about the Bible. Far from perfect, never will attain that, but still knowing that this was the base that I was going to launch the rest of my life from. So I went to school, did pretty good. You know, I was a big baseball guy, played music, had fun doing that stuff. But when I moved to Nashville at 23, I think I was, years old, single, not a penny to my name, and it was just a wide open, clean slate. Here we go. And thank God I had the roots that I had, because I did fall into some serious situations and problems and issues, but all along knowing that he was there. You know, like I had that background. I had those roots that were planted. And as I was growing, I always try to, it's like an analogy, this tree was just getting swayed like that, you know. And I did stuff that if I could go back, I would not do it in a heartbeat, you know. I went through a very long period of time, especially in those Broadway, playing in those bars every night. This is what you're talking about. And it'll lead to later stuff too. But yeah, I succumbed to many temptations and did a lot of stuff, like I said, that I would prefer to have not done. However, it led me to where I'm at today. So I don't go back and beat this guy up, you know, because it's life, and our enemy is a formidable enemy. So I went through a place where I've strayed. You know, I don't try to relate myself necessarily to the prodigal son, because I don't want to lift myself up to that category. But I think that's why these stories are in there, so that we can relate to them. But, man, I drifted so far away from my roots and from my base, bad. And it was so self-driven, and the business that we get into, I'm not saying it's across the board. Different people have different experiences with the music business and Music Row in Nashville. But for me, it was very difficult, and it got a hold of me. You know, this lifestyle, I loved Waylon and Willie, and so I want to try to form my career after the Outlaws, because I don't really like this commercial radio stuff. I want to be, you know, this thing. Well, what did they do? They had pretty rough lifestyles, you know. Sure did. So that made me and all my Hank Williams Jr. buddies go.
It killed a lot of them.
It did, yeah. We're going to go that route, you know. And so there was a reckoning for me. And the reckoning came in the form of my wife, who I met in 2008. And I just want to make sure, like, it's not like she stepped into my life and I said, oh, I've got to change everything because I want to bow down to her and have her. It was God's way of putting a thing in my life that said, you got a choice to make. And it's not her or your lifestyle, it's this life or that life. And I said, she's my partner, no question about it. I never had any questions about it. So that started a very difficult shedding process, you know. And so the first thing that the enemy did to me there was that he said, yeah, but what about this? Remember that you did this. Don't forget this. And that was the attack that he gave me. Well, fortunately, I had the roots, right? So I did go through a period right there where it was just dark, and it was like, yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, right? But I was fearing the evil. But I had the roots that helped me to know, right? No matter what you're going through, even though it doesn't make sense to you, he's got me. And I said this in one of my podcasts before. I said, that old picture that we see that's hanging, you know, like in the dentist office or whatever, that the footprints.
Yeah, oh yeah.
And so this may be repetitive to some people, but I've always seen that, and I thought, when I went through that period of time, I thought, no, that's not him carrying me, which is what it says on the thing. You know, where were you? And he's, oh, I'm carrying you. That's my footprints. I've always kind of felt like in that time in my life, he was there with me, no question. But in order for me to learn how to get out of that place that I was in, I had to walk out of it. He had to allow me, and he never let go of me. Don't get me wrong, but he had to let my footprints go through that sand for myself, because every day I would be like, God, just take this away from me. And he would, you know, now I know he would say, I am, but I'm not going to do it overnight, because you'll just do it again. You'll fall right back into it. You won't learn anything. So I got through that, and then I don't mean to belittle it like I got through that. I'm still fighting battles all the time. But from that point, I met Jamie, and then that's when you get out on the road. You're on the tour bus. You're married. You know, I got kids, and people are like, well, how do you deal with those, you know, temptations and those? It's like they weren't. I didn't even think twice about it, and I can confidently say I never had any problems with that. Actually, my problem was the being away from the thing that I knew mattered the most on earth was my people, you know. So that was really my biggest thing. So really my trials that I think you were referring to really came more the early years for me. And then as far as the temptations and then that kind of stuff, because I never had any problems out on the road really as far as that stuff goes. So,
man, that's that's miraculous in and of itself. I mean, because I can only imagine that in that industry, that is such a rare thing for a guy out there doing that job, living that lifestyle, to not succumb to alcohol, drugs, adultery, whatever it may be. Because, man, it's just, well, I mean, it's all around you, and you're out of town. Nobody's going to know but the guys that you're with.
Right.
It's just easy.
Well, and it does take over a lot of guys. I mean, it really does. The big problem is, so let's say, like my dad, he worked in a carpet factory when I was growing up. Well, you can't show up there hammered and work for 8 hours and party the whole time you're working and then go home. It's like, that ain't how it works, you know. Well, in the music business, like, depending on what kind of, what your alley is in there, they kind of expect it out of you in some respects.
It's the culture. Yeah, it's the heritage.
Right.
Yeah.
So one of the episodes the first episode that I filmed for Fully Armed was Cowboy, Eddie Long's the steel player, and Animal, so Wayne Turner, and they played with Hank Jr. back in the 70s and 80s. And
I got to go listen to that one.
You need to listen to it. It's there's some great stories, but the whole point was, like, they're with Hank Jr. in the 80s. Like, it's kind of their job to party. You know, that was the whole thing. But, man, you'll see if you listen to it, like, you know, they had a lot of demons to shed when that was all said and done, you know. But to go back to your point, it does kind of cater itself to that, right? Yeah. You know, they kind of expect that out of you. And then there's a lot of downtime. And then there's a lot of people, clamoring to get on the bus or backstage or all this stuff, you know. So there is a lot to it. And when I see these young artists, oh, not to name any, but, you know, young guys that are in their 20s and have just took off, you know, my heart goes out to them. It really does. I think we put them under a microscope like, oh, shame on them for this and this and this. Man, until you've been there and you've seen all of the stuff, you got to walk a mile in their shoes. You really do.
Yeah, yeah.
Because there's just so many temptations. But at the end of the day, man, there's a reckoning coming. Whoever it is and whatever it is, you know, they're going to have to face this stuff at some point, you know.
Yeah, so, man. Well, praise the Lord that that he sent you your wife, that woman that.
Oh man,
that changed that trajectory. What a gift, man!
Oh, what
a gift our women are, man.
It's unbelievable. I can't. Again, we could sit and talk for another 3 hours about the gift that we've been given with this partner, that makes us better people. But we also have to always remember that we are supposed to help make them better people too. You know, there's a balance in there. So
yeah.
But yeah, she was a life changer, 100%.
Well, when I see you now, you know, doing things the way that you're doing, so, you know, my wife got to go and do some photography and some video stuff with Drake at a concert that you guys played just a few weeks ago.
Yeah.
And dude, I see you up there having a good time, but because I had talked to a bunch of people about you, and people kept telling me about you.
Yeah.
And every time when they would talk about you, they would just talk about like how filled with joy you were, and how when they met you, you had an impact on them, and that you were a disciple of Christ. And I'm sitting here watching you up on this stage, man, in this place amongst all of this craziness and all of this, you know, foolishness and this and that. And I'm sitting there like the few clips I've seen, knowing that you're a man of God and that you're sober and that you have other reasons for being there. I know you do. Mm-hmm. And you have that perspective that the Holy Spirit's given you. It's like, man, it's just, to me, it's encouraging to know that you're there. Like, it just, to know that God has put you in that place, in that position that I'll never get to go as his disciple, but you're there.
Yeah.
And like, I don't know, it just fires me up for some reason,
well,
seeing you up there in that environment and knowing that you are set apart and you're there in that place and you're one of the very few. And man, I just pray that the Lord uses you mightily in that space. And I know you probably have stories, and maybe he already has, but just moving forward, man, because it's the same way in the SEAL teams, man. It's like people think that in order to be a missionary, right, or to find people that, you know, need to be led to Christ or whatever, or need to see an example of what a godly man looks like and how he's been called to live, they think we got to go to Africa or South America. Or it's like, no, man.
I'm laughing because the episode just came out. Emily Ann Roberts just put this. This timeline's not going to all work out, but I have to say that's exactly what we just talked about, because she's this young girl and she's out singing country music, and she said, you know, like, this is my mission field. And I said the same thing. I was like, yeah, you grow up thinking that your mission has to be going to some foreign country and doing, which God bless those people who are called to do that. Yeah. I think that's amazing.
I agree. It needs to be done.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's just not the only avenue.
But it's not, because, you know, I'm afraid that sometimes we get a little bit blinded living in this neck of the woods that, hey, we're all okay. We all go to church on Sunday. Everybody's saved. Let's just move on about our business. But then there's that pie chart that I was talking about. And how much of those people in that church are given up towards 100% to him? Let's look at the charts, you know, like the mission work needs to be done in every aspect of your life wherever God sends you. And which you're doing that, you know, with speaking and that stuff. Or with what we're doing right here, right? You said something earlier I wanted to touch back on too. and not to keep backtracking, but the fact that a lot of times we will be labeled as, you know, all Bible thumpers and this stuff and that stuff. What a wonderful opportunity that we have a chance to have our voice heard in more than, you know, a 10-minute, you know, monologue, that we get an opportunity for people to go, oh, I misunderstood what he meant by that. Yeah, they're not just the Bible thumpers or whatever. We struggle. We go through all the same stuff everybody else goes through. We all do, you know. I just think it's important that people are able to see and hear that we're with you. Like, we're not against you. We're all together in this.
That's
you
a
know?
good word, man.
But yeah, so you were talking about the being on stage and doing that kind of stuff. That's a balancing act too, right? Because I want to try to make sure that I remember that I'm in front of microphones because of him, and not to be self-serving. Like, and it gets a little tricky because I make music, right? And I put out songs, and I want people to listen to my songs because it helps me to continue to keep going, right? So there is a little self-serving in there because I want you to like my songs. So, so it makes me come back around to the being on stage. I do love it, you know, and I love playing music. It's just it's a never-ending chase for those cold chills because you just hit that thing all together as a band, you know, that kind of thing. So I do love it, but I also want to always remember when I have a microphone to, if nothing else, say his name.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm sure you can imagine, you know, going out in front of a Jamey Johnson crowd, you know, a couple thousand people that are going to watch Jamey Johnson, and then going up there and grabbing that microphone and going, all right, I'm going to say Jesus, and let's just see what happens. And it's overwhelming that we're not alone. Mm-hmm. Even in a crowd full of guys that you think are going to throw a bottle at you or something like that, they're with us, you know.
That's good.
Yeah, man. It's interesting.
That's good. And you just to be honest with you, from my perspective, you just look different up there.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just the light, man. You just look different.
Yeah, well, that's good.
And so maybe you've never heard that, but
no, I haven't. I mean, it's
to me, just watching you, and people can go and look at your Instagram page or check you out, and they'll see what I'm talking about.
Yeah,
it's encouraging. Let's take a little break. We'll come back.
All right, let's do it.
All right. We're back.
We're back.
Man, we've covered a lot of ground. One thing that I do want to ask about, though, is that we haven't talked about yet is songwriting.
Oh, yeah.
So we've talked a lot about playing music, the lifestyle, you know, instruments, all that stuff, but songwriting is like a whole nother lane.
Yeah. And
so when did you write your first song?
High school for the band, you know. We got the little band. Yeah.
Okay.
So I wrote a song called Downtown. Don't ask me to play it because I don't remember how it went, but I remember that, you know, it was just called Downtown. That's all I remember.
I'll be darned.
Yeah, in high school. And then in college, I started getting into it a little bit more and really kind of digging in a little more.
What does that process look like?
Well, which process? Like the one individual song or the getting into the whole thing?
Well, I guess writing a song. Like does it start with an idea or like an experience or like?
It depends on if you're asking. Obviously, you're asking me that now, so I'm coming from a very different platform. If you asked me that when I was in high school or college, I would say it was just inspiration. Something inspired me, and I want to write a song that makes me feel the way that song made me feel. You know, so that had a lot to do with it early on. Now. It's, man, having spent so many years on Music Row, surrounded in a community of people that are writing songs all the time. Like, you got to be careful what you say around somebody because they'll sneak over and write down this thing over here, you know.
Really?
Well, I mean, loosely speaking, yeah.
Well, I was in that documentary, not to sidetrack you, but I was reading about the Carter family and the guy. You know, it was the two women that sang. There was like a guy who, I forget his name, the guy's name, something Carter, but he was married to one of June Carter or one of them. But it was saying that he would travel all throughout his region and like try to find people who had a song.
Right.
And like he would go to these poor folks and just people from all different backgrounds, and if they had a song, he wanted to go and meet with them to see if he could get that song from them.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's a big deal to have a song or to have an idea, so I imagine there are people all over that are trying to kind of take from that. And
well, that's digging way back. That's back when they first started realizing that we can monetize this thing,
yeah,
you know?
Yeah.
So they would go to what we were talking about earlier. You're sitting on the front porch with a guitar and a banjo. Well, they go to it's A.P. Carter, I think, and there was Maybell.
That was him.
Yeah,
A.P. Carter. Yep.
Yeah. So they would go because they knew how to record. Now, they can put this thing on a record. That was very new. And so they knew that these guys would, in these communities, had this one song that old Joe over here plays every Friday night, and everybody loves it, Well, then that's the one.
Ain't that wild,
yeah.
man?
And so it's not necessarily like, in that case, I don't think that it was like we're trying to take old Joe's song. It's just like, man, we want to record some great songs, That's Americana right there, man.
Yeah.
But yes. It is interesting. There's a story that Willie Nelson was riding with Roger Miller, and Roger Miller, wrote some amazing songs. He was very funny. So they were riding. I'm loosely telling this story through the desert, and they're talking. And Willie goes, "Stop the car!" And Roger's like, "What?" And he pulls over, and Willie goes over. And I might have the two guys confused. It may have been Willie driving, and Roger got out of the car. I can't remember. And disappeared and came back. And the other one said, "Where'd you go? You go to the bathroom or something?" And he goes, "No, you said something that was really good, and I had to go over there and write it down because if I didn't, you'd see what I wrote down. You'd take it yourself, like that's that competitive."
Because and a lot of people don't know that Willie was a songwriter for a long time before he was actually known as a singer or.
If I recall correctly, he wrote, and I know he wrote "Crazy." It was Patsy Cline's big hit. "Crazy." He wrote that, but I'm thinking that he ended up getting like $100 in a publishing deal for it or something like that. Anyways, it worked out okay for Willie. It was all right, but yeah, he was definitely just writing songs with short hair and back in those days. So yeah.
But for you, I mean. Yeah, so you have an idea, you have something that happened in your life, and do you like lock yourself in a room somewhere until you get it complete, or
no? It depends. A lot of times, well, I'm not speaking for all songwriters because everybody does different. But for me, I like to try to write something myself if I can. If I stumble into an idea that's just like, man, I can't. This is such a great title or an idea or thought, but I can't quite wrap my head completely around it. Let's get somebody else in here, and usually that opens it up really well. Co-writing it's great. It really is, because you can, you take an idea that's this big and then you turn it into an idea that has this much potential because, you brought this other person or two people's aspects into it, So, but for me as a musician, about half the time it comes from a groove or from a chord progression, and about half the time it comes from this title or this idea or this thought.
Okay.
So it's sort of balanced out like that. But it's interesting though.
Do some of them, like, obviously, how many songs have you written?
Oh Lord, I don't know. It's a bunch.
A lot.
Yeah, many.
That's a lot of time, man.
Many. It's a lot of time. So when I first got into the publishing world in Nashville, I would write every day. I mean, I wouldn't write Saturday and Sunday. We're out gigging and doing stuff, but I'd write 4 or 5 days a week. And you don't get a song every time you do that, but you get a lot, So I don't know, man. I've probably written 1,000 songs, which that's all fun and games to say that. It's like, well, what do you got to show for it? You could write a song every day if you wanted to. But with intent on writing something that I really loved or that other people might enjoy to listen to, I've written a ton of songs, yeah.
How do you weed through them? Like, I mean, 1,000 songs. Like,
right. I think you have to really focus on what's happening in the moment, you know, like what song is sticking with you. You know, you might have wrote 4 songs last week. 2 of them you listen to the next day, and you're like, yeah, that didn't really hit me. You know, we tried, we went for it. It just didn't really stick. One of them does. So you go in and you record it, you know, and then you listen to the recording. Man, that's pretty good. I like that. So it just continues to gain momentum. But then we could get in this whole conversation about publishers and song pluggers and how they're trying to pitch songs to other artists. And there's a whole business that goes into that. It is part of songwriting, but at the same time, it's not. It's a whole different world.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, and there's a lot to cover there.
Yeah, yeah. And so, yeah, I get that. That would be more like the money side of it, you would say, like in terms of them.
Yes, it's a ways of trying to figure out how to monetize what it is that I'll give you an example. So in the really height of me going to Nashville, going to Music Row and writing every day, was trying to get stuff for me to record as a singer, but also, man, we're trying to get other people to cut these songs too, whoever it might be. So back in those days, and they may still have it now, I don't know, but it was called row fax. And so every week you'd get this fax sort of, you know, piece of paper, or, you know, it would be online that said, here's who's cutting today. Back then it would be like, well, Brad Paisley's cutting and he's looking for up-tempo positive or, you know, slow songs, whatever. It would show who's cutting, who's looking for songs, you know. So I would go into Music Row and we'd have writing appointments. And in this one individual case, I was writing with my buddy Chris Dubois, and he's a very successful now songwriter. He's done very well. But he had a connection through his publishing company and the record label with Paisley, with Brad Paisley. So we're like, man, Paisley's cutting next week. We need to write a song for him. And what's he looking for? Well, he's looking for something that's kind of like mid-tempo, like Dixieland Delight, you know, like something like that. So we wrote this song, and it's called Twilight in the South. And we both liked it. Man, that's good. I think that's really in the wheelhouse. Well, once we both agree on it, or whoever the songwriters are involved, we go, we should spend the money to make a demo of it. So basically you spend some money, and they go in and make an actual, you know, demonstration of what the song's going to sound like, so you can pitch it to the guys, right? So this was probably in, man, I may be off by 4 or 5 years, but it was probably in 07, 8, 9, somewhere in that ballpark that we wrote this song. And at that point in time, the one guy in town was singing all the demos. This one guy, man, is Chris Stapleton. He's a great singer. Let's get him to sing the demo. So he sang this song. And so I've spent the last 10 years listening to him sing my song, you know. That's
wild, man.
So, and actually Jamie ended up being that guy shortly after that. Like, he turned into the dude everybody's getting to sing their demos. So then we take that song, we pitch it to Brad Paisley, and they pass on it. You know, something else, Mud on the Tires ends up being the song that they cut for that record. And it's very similar to what we end up doing. But I love it so much, and my wife's listening to it for the last 10 years, and I'm like, I need to cut that song myself, you know. So I did end up cutting it, and it ended up being the title track on a record that I did in 2020, 21. I can't remember when I put it out. But that's sort of the life of that song, you know. And now it's still out in the world. You can go listen to it right now, you know. So that's to give you an idea of kind of how that stuff transpires.
It's crazy how deep the whole industry is. Yeah. Like, you talk about these guys like Chris Stapleton and Jamie Johnson, and all names that most people who are into country music now know. Mm-hmm. But you talk about the time that they spent where they were just singing demos. Like, nobody knows that. Like, dude, there's so many layers to to that industry before, and you know, so many layers back from the people that you just see and hear about all the time.
Right.
You know,
I'll never forget the first time I heard Stapleton's voice. I was writing so on Music Row, there's houses, you know, these old houses that the publishing companies buy and that you write songs in them. So we're sitting in a room like this, me and songwriter, and I hear this voice next door, you know, in the room next to us, and I'm like, who is that? And the guy I'm writing with was like, that's just, you know, Chris Stapleton. And I'm like, I never heard anything like that, man. And I walked in there, and it was somebody listening to a demo. It wasn't him in there. And I'll never forget that. That's the first time I heard. I was like, that dude is next level. Like he's a good singer, you know. So yeah, I'll never forget that.
But are there a good many people that can sing like that well that never reach the point where they're very well known, like Chris Stapleton has? Or do you hear a voice like that and you're like, that guy's gonna make it?
It's gonna happen, right? Most of the people that have that kind of talent, it's not like him. There's not many that can do what he does. So I'm careful to not say people like him, because there's not many people like him.
Yeah.
But most of those people will at least get an opportunity. Most of the time, if you can sing like that, you're going to. And even he had such a hard road because, and I remember this so plainly, like, you know, God, he's a great singer, but I don't know if we can, you know, he doesn't really have the look of Tim McGraw, you know, he doesn't have, and that was always working against him, you know, and I remember that, like, who cares, man? This guy's unbelievable.
Yeah.
And so there are plenty of, if you have that kind of talent, you're going to get more opportunities. What happens with those opportunities, you never know, but definitely that cream will rise to the top. But I tell you what, man, this business is really interesting because there's a lot of people who can't even kind of have that kind of vocal talent that are huge stars just because, man, stuff just worked out, you know?
That's wild.
It is, man. It's really interesting. It is. But yeah, I have seen a lot of acts through the years, a lot of artists that I'm like, man, they should have been at this place, you know, that should have. And it's just one thing or another happens and it just doesn't work out, you know. It's amazing. It really is.
I've always wondered that, man.
Yeah. It's a fact. They're out there. They are out there. But I guess, you know, you'll have that in any industry, I guess. But, you know, there's only so much room on that radio. I mean, you can only play so many 3-minute songs in a day, you know. So there's that. Of course, that's all changing, too, with online stuff. For sure, you know. That's a whole nother deal there.
Do all singers, musicians, do all of them write or attempt to write?
No. So, you know, that's a good point. George Strait, arguably one of the biggest country act, or any act ever, man, he made a living off of singing other people's songs. And he did it well, you know, like he had a great team too, though. He had people that helped him, like, man, here's a good song, you know, because he would get all the best songs pitched to him from all the writers. But I think in the last few years he's gotten into it as well. Everybody has the ability to do it, you know, but just a lot of people, Music Row, not so much as now as it used to be, but it used to be a serious factory of songwriters write the songs, singer sings the songs, and it all works well. And there were some exceptions. There's some amazing songwriters that were, I mean, Roger Miller, Willie Nelson, there's some good examples of that, you know. But yeah, there's a lot of artists that cut everybody else's songs, and then there's some that just do. Like Clint Black's a good example. If you remember the record back in the day, Killing Time, and it had all that stuff, he wrote all those songs. And that was different, you know. He came into town and he had this song, made this record, and it was huge, you know. But also, even in that same voice, you have a hard time having another record and another to follow all those with just having your own stuff, you know. Like it gets a little bit difficult there. So
it would. It seems like that would be almost impossible for that to be sustainable. If you were trying to just sing your own stuff, you know what I mean? Because, I mean, so I enjoy writing. I enjoy words. I think words are obviously really powerful. And I just think I've actually thought about maybe sitting down and trying to write a song one day.
Oh, really?
And I know nothing about the instrumental aspect that would go along with that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I love writing short form, you know, in just, you know, in stanzas or blocks. And it would be a fun challenge for me.
Well, you've already, I mean, you could argue you probably already have written a song. You just need to give it to somebody to put some music to it, and you've got it.
That's interesting, man.
Yeah.
I think it's impressive. I mean, what do you, is there an aspect that you enjoy the most? Like, is it songwriting? Is it playing? Is it singing? Like, is there an aspect that you enjoy?
Great question. There are two things that run neck and neck for me. So I'll just be honest with you, man. Songwriting is a job. Like, it's hard because there's a lot to it. There's not just like, man, 5 minutes later I was done. I mean, that does happen, and it's happened for me too, and that's always fun. You're like, thank God, man, this thing, because, you know, you start second-guessing yourself. You try to find this word that's perfect, the next thing you know, it can stretch on for a long time. It's work. I love having a finished product and going in the studio and going, all right, guys, 1, 2, 3, 4, bam. And, man, in Nashville, with the talent of the musicians that are there, that is a special moment where all of a sudden everybody's got these charts in front of them and they count the song off and you hear it for the first time, full band and these things, and it's like, that's special right there, man. I love that. But there is really nothing that beats a good live show. There's really not. Like, good energy, good crowd, the band's locked in, the sound is right, you know. Like, it's hard to beat that. I guess if I had to, well, of course, the thing is you're on the road a lot with that too, so that's the good thing about recording is you can go back home and go to bed that night.
Yeah.
But I guess if I had to choose, like, a really good live performance is really great. It really is. I love it. I really enjoy it.
Yeah, and I don't know that I've ever been to a really good live performance. Like, it seems like there's so much of a difference between at least more modern artists or music or singers.
Yeah.
Like, there's such a disparaging difference between how they sound on the record, right? Or when you download them on iTunes or whatever,
right.
or you know, watch it, you know, in studio. There's a disparaging difference between what they sound like then and what they sound like when you hear them or see them live.
Yeah.
You know? And why is that? Do they manipulate things in the studio?
Oh, yeah. But
okay,
a lot of that would depend, and I'm not asking for names, but a lot of it would depend on who it was that you saw, you know, like that would play into it. But vocally, absolutely. They can absolutely manipulate. Yeah. I mean, and actually, with a lot of modern music, hip hop specifically, they they overdo it on purpose to give it that sort of robotic kind of thing. Like, they do it on purpose, which to each his own. If that's what you dig, that's what you dig. But most certainly, most of the vocals that you hear on the radio have been ran through a computer and have been tuned. I will not say all, because I'm not going to speak for everybody, because I've heard some dudes. Well, Jamie's a great example, man. When he sings live, it'll make your hair stand up, man. I mean, he can do it, you know, like it's legit. But there's a lot of them that have a lot of help in the studio.
Yeah. That's when we look back at the old school guys. You know, that's always been, to me, the difference between Hank Jr. and Waylon Jennings. Is Hank Jr. sounds like crap live.
You think so?
In my opinion,
no, that's all right. Yeah.
Now you listen to Hank on a recording.
Yeah.
And man, he sounds good. I mean, he'll fire you up, right? Yeah. But and maybe it's because he's drunk half the time live. I don't know.
There was an era where that was for sure.
That might be what it is, but you know but like Waylon, man, you know, you listen to him and to me, he actually sounds better live a lot of times than he even does on a recording. And so that, you know, that to me is like, and of course I never saw him in person. I'm just watching a video of him performing live.
Yeah.
But I'm like, man, that dude he's legit, you know.
He was. And a lot of times they did their recordings super off the cuff, and he probably did a lot of his vocal recordings in the studio live. I wasn't there, but I'd venture to bet, knowing the type of person he was, he probably would walk in there and sing it one time and be like, well, that's a take, Hoss. You know, I could see him doing that. But that's a blessing to have a voice like that.
Yeah, man. Yeah, and I agree. I think Jamie's another one of those guys that the times I've watched him perform or watched a recording of him performing live, it's like, yeah, man, that's Jamie Johnson, 100%. That's exactly what he sounds like.
Oh, it is.
That's pretty amazing, man.
I know. I was trying to get you guys to come to Chattanooga to the Jamie show there a few weeks ago, but you had a previous engagement.
Yeah,
or something
man,
like
we've
that.
been traveling so much, and I do want to come at some point and be able to see you and see you guys do your thing. One thing that's really kept me from experiencing that is because of my old job. Like, I'm extremely hyper vigilant.
Yeah.
And when you get me in environments where there's a bunch of people, and especially if they're acting crazy and it's loud, and a lot of times I get a little antsy and uncomfortable.
Well, you don't enjoy the moment, right?
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. But
I get it.
Yeah, one day when you guys are maybe doing something live and it's a small audience, and if there's an opportunity for me to slip in and just experience that and be able to see you guys, because I've only ever been to one live concert in my whole life.
Yeah.
So it would be cool.
What was it?
It was something in Virginia Beach. It was a country thing.
Like a festival kind of thing?
But it was in a big thing and out on a lawn, and I wasn't close. But that's definitely on my list. Yeah. Like, I want to be able to experience a show from guys like you and your team, professionals that I listen to and I like their music, experience that up close, in person. That would be really cool.
You need to, man. You need to.
Yeah, that's high on my list.
Yeah.
Well, dude, I know you got a new song.
Yeah.
That's getting ready to come out.
Right.
I've had you talking for the last 2.5 hours. So I don't know if you want to give us a little taste of that.
I would love to.
While we're here, I think it'd be awesome, man. The listeners would love it if you feel comfortable doing that.
I feel very comfortable doing it. And actually, I feel comfortable doing it in here because I think just within the last week, I turned you guys on, and I heard all of you guys singing "Macon." You had to get back to Macon. I was like, man, there's some good voices. And I think I saw Chili, wasn't it, holding that guitar? And I'm like, so we got a guitar picker in the bunch.
Yeah, man. We try our best, but I can promise you this is going to be the best performance by far that we've ever had on the 3 to 7 podcast.
We might need to, and we're going to get our editors. We're going to put them to work with this right here.
Roger that, man.
But
tell me a little bit about this song.
I will. And it kind of falls back into what we were talking about earlier. Trying to make sure that I portray myself and my feelings into a song, but also bringing my spiritual walk into it as well. And I'm an open book to him. I haven't always been, but I'm trying real hard to be an open book to him and be like, flow through me, and I have not done that. I have let me flow through me most of the time. Now, that being said, we both have brought this up earlier. We're not going to impress him. That's just not going to happen. We're not going to make him go, oh, I didn't think you could do that. Like, no. And all we can do is just praise him, right? So this song was inspired to me by just current events. And, of course, I have always heard and said that if you've got to put too much explanation into a song, you didn't write it correctly. Like you should just sing it and then it speaks for itself. And I get that. But I was just listening to the radio and watching TV, and, just the facts are that common sense seemed to be something that has just slipped through the cracks somehow. And, again, I know that our battle is not against people and flesh and blood, so that's not what this is about. But it did occur to me that I love my granddads, both of them. So J. Ben Forrest was my mom's dad, and then Billy Hennessy was my dad's dad. I loved them so much. Not perfect people, but they were from a era and from a generation of dudes that guys like me and you will never understand. my granddad told me stories about doing stuff at a young age that I don't know if I could have ever pulled off, you know.
Yeah.
Clearing the whole river valley so they could flood it, you know, and cutting down giant trees with a cross-cut saw and another man and hooking them to a mule and having put, like, man, I mean, that is a different kind of generation. And then to go through what they went through, the trials and the you know, the things that went on through the 40s and the 50s, and that I think that it just made a very strong generation of guys. And that's kind of what, you know, inspired this song. And it also, it has some of my beliefs in it. It has some things in it that I feel strongly about that I think I'm on the right track with. So, but speaking of Hank Jr., he always took his E string right here and dropped it down and got that thing.
I've actually heard him do that.
But I'm going to cheat a little bit and use my tuner so I make sure that I got it right. Make sure I got it right here. This is live music, by the way, folks. Live music. So just, here we go. It's called Common Sense. My granddad was born in 1924. Seems to me they don't make them like that anymore. He was tougher than a leather glove, put his faith in God above, and an old Ford truck. He sat me down the day I turned 17. He said, the whole world's going crazy, boy, beats all I've ever seen. The price of gas is through the roof. Can't trust what's on the news. You need a lot more than love. It's been 10 years since he passed away, but I can still hear him say, love the Lord with all your heart. Put your trust in Jesus. Don't go wishing on a star. And don't go to fight unless you know what you're fighting for. Common sense ain't that common anymore. He said, don't believe nothing you hear and half of what you see. Remember all the ones that died. Freedom don't come free. A boy grows up to be a man, and every child is part of God's plan. They ought to get a chance. Yeah, he said, a hard day's work, oh, it's good for you. Don't get in over your boots. Oh, and love the Lord with all your heart. Put your trust in Jesus, not on some shooting star. And don't go to fight unless you know what you're fighting for. Boy, common sense ain't that common anymore. Love the Lord with all your heart. Do unto others, boy, that's the place to start. And don't go to fighting unless you know what you're fighting for. How I wish he'd come walking back through that door, 'cause common sense ain't that common anymore. Common sense.
That was so freaking cool, man. I literally just got done telling you, like, I would love to be able to sit and just watch somebody like you do your thing.
Yeah.
And I just got to see it.
There you go.
Like,
right there in front of you.
Live and in person right here in front of me, man.
Yeah.
That was powerful, man.
Well,
that was powerful.
Thank you. And I'm serious, man. If you got, I mean, we'll probably talk about this later, but if you got some lyrics and some stuff you've written, we can put it to music. We should try it. It'd be cool.
Man. Yeah, that's a powerful thing, dude. And like one thing that I think that we haven't talked about, that's an amazing song. And it,
thank you.
I love the way you've incorporated like country living, lifestyle, the men that we looked up to growing up, and your faith and scripture and everything all into one show. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like that, it's just,
well, that's the thing about music is that we can sit and talk about things and pick them apart, which we have, and it's a good thing. I'm not saying it's not.
Yeah.
But with music, you got 3 minutes, 4 tops to get a point across and make them rhyme a little bit. Like it's a very interesting thing to do.
Yeah, that was amazing. And it's one thing that we haven't talked about is how powerful music is. And talking about it in context with your show, Fully Armed.
Yeah.
And the scripture that you share out of Ephesians 6. Music is a powerful, powerful tool that can be wielded for good or for evil.
Yeah.
And it's so powerful that there is evidence in Scripture that Lucifer was in charge of the timbrels and the music in heaven.
Like that was his thing, right?
That was his thing.
Yeah.
Like that was as an archangel. Like that was his leadership role, was to orchestrate the music that was. And you said earlier, God created music and obviously created us with the ability to hear it and to sing it and to play it. And you know, I don't think a lot of people, even Christians, know that. And it's a testament to how powerful the gift that God has given you is and how it can be wielded in a powerful way, either for good or for bad.
Yeah.
And I think so, at least in recent times, but you could go even back generations, music has been one of the tools that has been used by Lucifer or Satan now.
Yeah.
He's still using that tool
Yeah.
in order to accomplish his purposes. And for you to create songs that do mention the name Jesus and talk about doing unto others as you would have others do unto you, and that's a great place to start. And dude, you understand that you're hitting old Satan like on his home turf with that, right?
Oh, that's a good point.
Like you understand, like you're taking his thing and you're actually turning it on him and you're wielding it against him.
Huh, that's a good point. I hadn't thought about that.
Like think about how powerful that is, man.
Yeah.
The gifts that God has given you, how you can take that and you can enter the camp of the enemy and say, no, I'm going to take the thing that God made that you have taken and you've perverted and you've used it for your purposes.
Yeah.
And I'm going to turn that on its head and I'm going to make something within the boundaries of what it was created to do.
Yeah.
And I'm going to leverage that against you in this world, in this fight that we're all engaged in. And it's just right in alignment with your mission and your show and what the Lord's put on your heart, man.
Yeah.
I mean, your specific gifts are right there in that wheelhouse, dude. And you're doing it.
Well, it's good that it's encouraging to hear it from the outside in, because we get, as I know you get that too, you get kind of tangled up in your own way if you're not careful. You know? And so, and from songwriting too, you know, like it's a journey. Like I'm changing all the time in the direction that I'm going with what it is that I'm trying to write, you know, and what the goal is within that too. And the goal with that song is just to sort of, man, I just feel so strongly about this thing that I just got to write something about it.
Yeah.
And I want to make sure too, like even within the title, common sense is not that common. Common sense is not God though. Like, it's not the final verdict, you know, like God is bigger than common sense, because common means what you and I and everybody, the large majority of people share this thing, and that makes it common. And that, you know, it seemed like used to there was more common sense, but it's still human.
Yeah, you know? Well, when I think about the word common sense, I think about us having a perspective that is in alignment with the way God created things to be. Mm-hmm. Like, common sense to me is thinking in a way that's in alignment with Scripture, with His Word, with His natural laws, with all of that, just thinking in a way that's in alignment with the Word of God. And even down to the very now simplest thing, God made us male and made us female. Like,
seems simple.
That common sense thinking is thinking along those lines, right? Yeah. Like, that's a fact.
Right.
That's in alignment with reality. And what is reality? It's God's created design for the universe.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, that's common sense. And that's becoming less and less common.
It is.
We see it when we walk into a restaurant in some liberal city somewhere, and they refuse to have a male and female bathroom because it's no longer proper for you and me to think that God created us male and female.
Yeah.
And so common sense in my mind does tie it. Again, like you said, it's not ultimate.
Right.
But it does really tie into God's created design for us as individuals, for us and the way we live our lives and the way we think and the way we perceive the world around us, you know?
Well, that's why I reference the main thing that I reference in that song, the first line of the chorus, love the Lord with all your heart, and then at the end of it I say do unto others, is from Mark chapter 12. And I wanted to make sure that when I'm saying common sense isn't that common, I'm not just on my soapbox. I'm saying here's what Jesus said common sense is, and that is love the Lord with all your heart and love your neighbor as yourself. That's what He told us to do. Those are the commandments that matter. And I always ask people on my show, you know, what's your one Bible verse, or what verses do you arm you? What do you go to?
Yeah.
And if I'm asked that, there's a bunch of things, you know, and one might think that it's Ephesians chapter 6 because the whole show's based off of that. But really, at the end of the day, when I dig into the Word, the most important stuff that's in there, in my opinion, are the words that He said. Like He's the dude we're basing our whole lives on. So what did He say? And the most important things that He said in the things He said were, here's what you should do. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, your mind. Like, that's all of the pieces. It's not just your soul loves Him. It's your mind loves Him too. We got to focus on that. And love your neighbor as yourself, which that's a whole nother thing. We could spend another 3 hours talking about what's it really mean to love yourself. But I put those things in the song specifically because that's God, that's Jesus saying, here's what common sense is. Love Him, love your neighbors, and we'll take care of the rest of it.
Yeah.
But we just don't do that, you know? So.
Yeah. And there's so much depth to that. Like you said, that's a whole nother conversation, because when you talk about, just like in that song, love the Lord your God with all your heart, like what that's implying is like that's setting you up for the way you live your life, because love is not an emotion.
Right. Yeah.
Love isn't how I feel towards you.
Right.
Like I've got to act that out,
Yeah.
you know? And Jesus himself, he says, those that love me will keep my commandments, right? And so it just, it sets you up for everything.
Yeah.
The way your worldview, the way you perceive the world around you in reality. And it's deep stuff, man. And I feel so honored that you would take the time away from your family to drive down here to have this conversation for me and for our listeners, and then share with us that song and your gifts and your talents that you've been given. I just feel really honored, man.
Well, the feeling's mutual, and I feel honored that you would let me set it. It's a nice new table, by the way. It's pretty cool. But I got to tell you, man, from the get-go, from the start of the thing that I'm trying to do, I'm doing with Fully Armed, there's been a web that has connected me to you guys right from the start, you know. So I don't have any question that the design was for me to be sitting right here, right now, today. Got zero question about it. I know that's where it was meant to go from the start. So it is a blessing to be able to enter into your world, and I appreciate it, and letting me, you know, present myself and my song in this setting. So it really is, man. It's a blessing. I really appreciate it.
Amazing, man. Is there anything else that we missed that
there is
on your heart? Yeah,
there is. And that is that we don't need to sit in here for another 3 hours. We just got to do it again, because there's too much to cover, man.
Yeah, man.
There's a lot. I just feel like it's not just me and you. You know, I just feel like there's a sense of a yearning for brotherhood, and so I encourage everybody that's listening to this, look around you. Who are your brothers? Who is it that you can turn to? Whether you're super close to them at the moment or not, God's put people in your path and in your life on purpose. Look around you, pay attention, and see who it is that he's speaking to you, that you need to have a conversation with this person. I don't really know where I'm going with it other than just to kind of get that word out.
That's a good word, man.
That's why we're here today. So
Yeah. Well, I think it needs to be said, because a lot of us go through life and we don't pay attention. We don't try to extract lessons. We don't try to look at the people around us and value those relationships. We're complacent, right? That's the human default. It is to move through life in a complacent way. We don't think about those things. Therefore we don't appreciate those things. We don't utilize those things, those lessons, relationships, the brotherhood and the family that we have within the body of Christ. We waste a lot of that, man.
Yeah.
We waste it because we're not deliberate, right? We're just complacent all the way through our lives.
Yeah.
And we just let things happen to us, or hope things are going to happen to us that we want to happen, and then we end up just getting ready to die one day, and we're like, crap, I don't get to do that. I'm out of time, and I don't get to do that over again.
No, you're right. Start now.
Yeah.
Right?
That's the truth, man. Well, I hope that one day, I get to sit down and Judy. Yeah. And Judy is, by the way, if you go listen to the Fully Armed podcast, you'll figure out what Judy is.
Yeah.
But I hope I get to sit down and Judy in the next conversation we have. I hope it's there and you get to lead us through that.
It's going to happen 100%. Matter of fact, I've even got some stuff here that I did not get to that we'll just do it next time, because there's stuff that you guys do and talk about that I'm like, yeah, I want to talk about that. Yeah, I want to talk about that. You know, a lot of it has to do with how does politics play into Scripture, you know, and a lot of current events and stuff. There's a lot of stuff to go over.
Dude, let's do it, man.
All right, good deal. Thank you, brother. I appreciate it, man.
Thank you, Chris.
Absolutely.
I love you, man.
Love you.
Thank you guys for tuning in. I will attach all the links to where you can find Chris and his podcast and everything that he's doing in the description of this episode. So you guys just click the description. I'll hyperlink everything in there. You guys share the show, man. give Chris a shout out. Thank him for his time that he spent here with us today. And go follow him and listen to his show because he's doing great work. Love you guys. Enough said.